Marked by Shadows, written by Short Story Queen. Moonlight pooled over the border creek like spilled milk, thin currents sliding around stones polished by years of paws. Elara kept low in the ferns, palm damp against moss, pulse steady, because the younger wolves behind her needed steady. The air tasted of wet bark and iron far away. Mist reached up from the water and turned the trunks to pillars. The stones that marked the line between Moonvale and Nightfang glowed pale, a quiet row of bones. The mind-link touched her like a cool hand on the back of the neck. Elara. Ryland's voice carried that calm weight only an alpha could hold, the kind that made hunters breathe slower without meaning to. West Ridge watches are returning. Pull your group to the juniper shelf and wait on my word. Almost there. Her answer was a thought pushed gently into the web that stitched Moonvale minds together. It came back to her as a faint hum through skin and scar, a reminder that she was never truly alone on their side of the world. The boy beside her still wore his human shape. His knuckles were white on the short spear they had given him at dawn. He had freckles he had tried to hide with soot. He was brave enough to shake without running. Elara slid 2 fingers along the shaft and lowered the tip so it would not catch his leg if he stumbled. Breathe, Heim. His throat worked and he nodded. The 2 yearlings ahead of him were shifted, coats dark as water at night, bellies low, ears tipped forward. Behind, Miraine's scent drifted like rosemary bruised between fingers. The healer moved as if the forest liked her. It always had. You're pushing them close to the line. Miraine's presence brushed the link, no scold in it, only care. We need to map where Nightfang has thinned the undergrowth. If we get a run to the stones, I want their feet to know where not to fall. Teach them tomorrow. Tonight is wrong. Elara tasted the air again. Pine pitch. Creek water. A distant thread of smoke that could have come from Moonvale camps or from the far face of the ridge. Her wolf lifted inside her ribcage, ears pricked. Move. She stilled. The ferns to the right shivered without wind. The mist thickened and thinned in a sheet. A night bird hushed. Elara raised a hand and the yearlings froze. Heim's breath became a small squeak, and then he killed even that. Good boy. The first Nightfang wolf appeared like a shadow that had made up its mind to be a body. Low and heavy at the shoulder, eyes ember-lit, paws soundless on damp soil. Another moved 3 trunks deeper, a dark slide between roots. Not a full hunting party, scouting teeth, a test, or a lure. Ryland's tone sharpened in her head. South line hold. All patrols turn to the ridge. No one crosses the creek. Elara, count and report. 3, maybe 4. Spreading into a crescent. The web trembled with the paths of nearby Moonvale guards adjusting, their thoughts like footfalls rippling the fabric. Across the stones, Nightfang minds did not touch hers. They moved in their own current, quiet and controlled, as if the forest itself held a second river she could see but not swim. A Nightfang wolf fainted left, and Heim's spear point wobbled with him. Elara caught the shaft and held it level with 2 fingers. Her other hand found a flat stone along the creek. She did not throw it yet. The first wolf came low for her ankle. She hopped back, heel finding purchase on a root slick with mist, and brought the stone forward in the same movement. She flicked her wrist, and the stone snapped the air and struck the wolf's snout with a soft crack. The wolf recoiled and blinked. Elara used that breath to angle herself between the Nightfang line and the trainees. Her wolf pressed hard against her bones. Shift. Not yet. The yearlings would follow whatever she did. The last thing she wanted was 3 fast hearts lunging at shadows in unfamiliar ground. A man stepped out from behind the first Nightfang, fluid as a wolf changing in a dream. He was tall, hair stuck to his temples by fog, a map of pale scars across his ribs. The silver rings along his ear glinted like teeth. His mouth curved at the corner when he saw Elara hold the line. He did not bear his own. Bring her down, he said it to the wolves. Not to her. The order did not need the mind link. It rode the air. Elara stepped sideways on the root and slid forward the way a knife does when it knows exactly where ribs meet. The first wolf came again, angling to clip her knee. She met him with her shin and felt the impact through her bones. Another shape hit from the side and claws skated along her shoulder. Pain flared sharp, clean. She used the heat of it, rolled, and came up with a fistful of mud and leaf mold she shoved into an eye. The wolf yelped, scrabbled blind, and she shoved him away, trying to keep the line curved around the trainees instead of bent toward the stones. A pressure touched the edge of her mind that did not belong to Moonveil. It felt like a coin of cold metal laid behind the tongue. Her skin wanted to step away from it. Her wolf's hackles rose without fur. Wind shifted. The other Nightfangs stilled as if a string had pulled through them. The scarred man's gaze flicked past Elara, and then he lowered his eyes. Not submission. Awareness. He arrived without hurry, as if the night had been making a place for him all along and would have looked wrong if he had not filled it. Not in wolf form. Not less. Power hung on him like shadow. Eyes amber and steady. Not hot, not indulgent. A banked fire that made everything around it take on clearer lines. The scent that moved with him was pine sap over smoke with a deep, clean metal edge that made Elara's tongue forget sweetness for a beat. The Nightfang Alpha did not need to raise his voice. The wolves eased a step back in a single quiet tide when he reached the curve of ferns. Enough. Haim took a thin breath that shook. Mirian's hand pressed his shoulder and steadied him. The yearlings lowered bellies instinctively. Elara did not. She set her feet in the mud, as if planting a flag no one asked for. Her wolf surged up with a single command that did not bother to be words. Run. She could not run. Not with the three behind her. The Alpha watched the trainees, measured their fear, and returned his attention to Elara as if the calculation had confirmed what he had already chosen. You're Moonveil. Not a question. The low, even tone made it sound like there could be another answer if she preferred to lie. Elara lifted her chin and did not give him a name. The rule was old and sensible. A true name is a key. Keys don't belong in enemy hands. The scarred man shifted his weight and a ring clicked. The Alpha did not glance at him. He stood where Elara could feel the heat of his body by the way the mist warmed near his shoulder. He was close enough to touch, not touching. Her pulse knew where he was without eyes. Heat climbed the back of her neck and she hated it. The mind link tightened like a drawn bowstring. Elara, locate West Creek Crossing. Nightfang leader is present. Hold the line. My wolves are 2 minutes out. Do not engage further. 2 minutes is a year in a clearing. Elara kept her attention where it needed to be. The Alpha's gaze touched the smear of blood on her forearm where claws had drawn her earlier. He reached in slowly and brushed the edge of that blood with the back of his knuckles. Careful, not gentle. Testing. Her skin burned where the air touched after his hand moved away. The wolf inside her snarled at the same instant her human lungs forgot to pull the next breath. The contradiction made heat gather at the base of her spine, sharp and humiliating. Brave little Moonveil. The words were almost too quiet to be real. If he had spoken louder, they would have been cruelty. Soft made them something else she did not have a drawer for. The yearlings shifted closer to Mirian. The healer began to slide them backward along the line of ferns, moving slow enough not to pull Nightfang eyes. Elara felt the motion behind her like a string lengthening. She expected claws to block them. None came. The Alpha's attention did not move from Elara. Courtesy, her wolf observed in a flat tone, or the satisfaction of a hunter that knows the big game is already cornered. A Moonveil call rose far to the west, bright and high. An answering Nightfang song rolled low and heavy through the wood. Border magic breathed around the stones, cold and clean. The Alpha took a step that closed what little space remained, and the world shrank to his breath and hers. He lifted a hand again, palm open this time, stopping with his fingers a breath from her throat. Not touching. Close enough that the skin there felt heat as if his palm had a fire in it. Give me your name. He did not deserve it. She gave it anyway because honesty sometimes is another kind of blade. Elara. He said the syllables once slow, tasting them with a grit in the voice that turned the sound to something heavier than it should have been. The taste of her own name in his mouth hit low. She refused to let it show. The link stabbed through with Ryland's command. Do not engage. Do not answer. Late. Elara's wolf gave a small, sharp laugh that eased nothing. She felt night gather along the ridge like soldiers leaning over a balcony. The scarred man reached into a pouch and drew out a length of dull metal chain. Not iron. Not silver. Something that learned the shape of wrists without burning them. The sound it made when he let it slide through his hand was too soft for anyone to hear, and somehow went through Elara anyway. The Alpha did not take the chain at once. He studied Elara, then the stones, then the line of her shoulders. The thought across his face was not triumph. It was choice. It was also time. The next Nightfang move came from her left. Not claws. Weight and speed. A wolf barreled low into her shins, and another hit high at her shoulder from the right. The two together took her balance for a single necessary half-breath. She rolled with the hits to keep bone from breaking, grabbed fur and used it to pivot, slammed her heel into a rib and did not wait to see what cracked. Heem cried out. It was small, but it was enough to pull her attention. She did not turn her head. She felt through the link instead, and found the boy a few steps back. Mirain's arm braced across his chest. A Nightfang yearling had crept around to their flank and crouched there, uncertain, excited. Elara bared her teeth without opening her mouth. The yearling flinched and vanished back into fern. The chain kissed her wrist. It was so fast she almost convinced herself it had not happened. Then the cool of it wrapped skin and bit with the smallest edge, and the truth arrived with the taste of blood she had not meant to bite. Ryland's voice hit the link hard enough to make it sting. Elara, do not cross those stones. Do you understand me? Her chest hurt. She did not know if it was from the claw strike or the line of her brother's voice. Understood. She could not stop what was happening. She could decide how it looked. The scarred man tightened the loop. Elara jerked her arm as if she would snatch that choice from him and slipped the metal over her wrist herself. If she was going to be bound, then let it be because she set it there, not because a stranger did. The Alpha watched her hand close, and something unreadable flickered through his gaze, a brief loosening around the mouth that was not a smile. Stubborn moonveil. The words brushed her like smoke. The chain tugged. Two wolves moved behind her, close enough to be heat shadows. She did not shift. She did not bow. Her breath stayed steady, and the ground felt like something she owned for one last heartbeat. Mirain's thought pressed in hard, thick with feeling that made Elara's eyes burn. I'm with you. Get them to Ryland, I will. Elara, listen. Do not let them force the shift. Keep your core quiet and your breath low. Think of the creek. Think of the way it never tries to stop the rock. It slides around it and keeps moving. Elara took that in and tucked it under her ribs. The chain pulled. The stones were 3 steps away. The border breathed. Her wolf went very still. If we step over, the web will thin. I know. If we do not, they will rip us down and carry us anyway. I know. Then we choose the step. We do not give them the drag. She stepped when the chain asked. Her heel touched the Nightfang earth. Cold went up her spine like a wire. The web that held Moonveil mines dimmed to a thread she could pinch between fingertips. It did not break. Not yet. The scent of her own skin altered, a fraction gone to smoke. Rogue was a word with edges that could be felt long before it cut. Heim sobbed once without sound. Mirain breathed a wordless comfort that felt like warm cloth over cold hands. Ryland did not speak again. The silence of an alpha holding himself still was its own kind of speech. The Nightfang alpha turned and the wolves flowed with him. The chain drew Elara in a half circle and set her beside his shoulder, as if she had always walked there. They passed under pines where sap beads looked like stars on wounded bark. They crossed a saddle where the ridge wind flattened the mist into a sheet. The stronghold rose out of the dark without warning, all black timber and stones that refused to give back any moon. Torches burned along the wall. Their smoke slid up and vanished into the night as if swallowed. Inside the gate, eyes watched from shadow. Elara kept count and kept breathing. The mind link thinned another degree with every step until it felt like holding a hair with wet fingers. The yard was hard-packed dirt lined with claw grooves that had never fully smoothed. A long hall ran along the right, its eaves heavy with old wood. Beneath them, 3 figures waited in coats trimmed with fur, faces marked by thin, pale scars that caught the light. The elder tribunal watched like weather watches a field. Calculation without haste. One turned to the alpha. The voice was low and dry. You choose to bring the spark into dry grass, and I choose to remove a thorn. Their gazes touched and slid away. The wolves formed a half-ring facing inward. Elara stood at the center where the earth had remembered every story it had been given in claw marks and dark stains. She set her shoulders. If her knees wanted to unlock, the forest would not see. The alpha faced her. The chain lay across his palm like a line on a map. He stepped in and stopped with only a breath of air between his skin and hers. The heat of him reached through that space as if warmth were a language he rarely used and saved for moments he would not waste. Give me your eyes. They were already his, not in the way he wanted, in the way that a cliff has your attention when you are at its edge. He lifted his hand toward her throat and paused there, not touching. The pause worked on her worse than contact would have. Heat and fear braided in the space his palm warmed. Her wolf spoke softly from the dark corner where it had gone to listen. Now we see what this is. What is it? Not safety. She had not expected safety. Not hunger either. Not yet. Something in between that could become either. A wind rolled through the yard and lifted the hair at her nape. It carried his scent across her mouth, and it made the next breath hard to swallow. The chain did not move. The wolves around the ring held still. The tribunal watched, with the blank interest of a winter sky. The alpha lowered his hand. He looked at the chain, then at the moon, then at Elara. The decision was visible only by the way the air changed. He turned to the ring. Witness. The word was quiet. It landed like a stone in water, and ripples went out from it through wolves and wood in the dark. Elara felt the cliffhanger of the moment open under her like a seam in ice. She was cold to the elbows and hot at the throat. She was Moonveil with 1 foot in Nightfang's yard. She was a hunter with a chain around her wrist who had stepped forward on purpose. The alpha took one last step closer, so near she could hear the roughness of his breath. He studied her mouth with a flick of attention that made heat try to live there. Welcome to Nightfang, Elara Wynther. His voice was even. The yard went quiet in the same way a forest goes quiet when a storm has crossed and the trees wait to see what lightning changed. The chain tugged once more. The moon looked ready to slide off the edge of the hall roof. Elara did not move or speak. Her wolf breathed with her, slow and low, counting the beats until the next thing. She was captured. She was standing. She was not done. The storm held its breath above the ridge, a bruise the wind kept pressing but never breaking. Torches hissed along the stronghold walls. Elara stood under the eave where rain should have fallen and traced claw cuts in the hard earth with her eyes. The courtyard scars read like a history that refused to fade. The bond stirred when Draven crossed the yard. Heat found its way under her skin without touching it. She kept her gaze on the ground until his steps stopped beside her. Close. Not crowding. The air between them felt warmer than the torchlight could explain. You're studying the marks. I'm counting how often your wolves chose teeth over sense. Silence settled. Not anger. A stillness that weighed. You asked to see our records, he said. I want the parts you didn't burn. He led her along the eave to a side door finished so well the hinges had no sound. Inside, a long, low room ran like the hollow of an old tree, shelves carved from black timber, bark-bound pages stacked by scent and season. Smoke and resin had soaked into everything. Winter, blood, ash. The tribunal thinks reading will teach you our law, he said. What cuts and what only frightens. And you. I want you to see the thing before you try to break it. She slid a volume free. The bark was warm from the room. Thin cuts filled with soot formed a clean script. Border counts, winter waits, births, deaths. At the end of a line, a deeper groove. Betrayal. Her thumb paused there. This one. 15 winters passed, he said, voice lower. My father's last year. And the betrayal. Pack within pack. A young wolf promised to my house gave what she knew to our enemies. We paid for it in bodies and in a year of hunger. His wolf rose inside the bond without sound, cold and steady, watching the doorway. Elara rested a palm on the open page and felt the room tilt a fraction. Your mate. No. The word scraped. Promised by old men who loved bloodlines. She was never mine. She belonged to her fear, then to the ones who bought it. Wind dragged a low note across the shutters. Elara closed the volume and slid it back. He watched her hands. Not hunger. Measure. That look did worse work on her breath than hunger ever had. They asked this morning to put you on a dais, he said. They want a speech about leverage. What did you tell them? I prefer results. And those look like what? He opened another ledger. Not seasons. Oaths broken, fines carved into bark, names cut so deep some letters split. She skimmed and looked up. They want you to use me to call Ryland to your gate, she said. They want proof the mark makes me yours. They want a show. And you. I don't raise my pack to cheer for chains. You marked me under torches. He did not move. The bond darkened, then steadied like a coal held in wind. I don't forgive the stones, she said. If it ever comes, it won't begin here. He nodded once, a motion that gave nothing away. The quiet between them didn't rot. It thickened. Show me what your records can't, she said. His wrist lifted, not touching. A small invitation. She could see the faint moons where a chain had rested when he looped it around his own skin in the yard and chose not to bind her with it. That memory shouldn't matter. It did. She set 2 fingers to his pulse. Heat ran up her arm. Not pictures, but tastes. Snow to the knee. A boy holding a blade too long for his reach and refusing to drop his eyes when elders passed. Laughter that didn't warm. Ash and iron. Winter hunger. Sentences spoken because a pack would slide if a jaw didn't hold it. The weight of command that didn't shrink when you set it down. Her wolf stepped closer, curious despite herself. We knew he was hard, we didn't know what pressed him into that shape. She lifted her hand. The small loss landed low in her stomach. Now you have something I never offered, he said. I took it. You were given it. She turned to the high window. The storm watched without rain. Distance steadied her spine. Distance wasn't relief. It was a door against a room that held heat she didn't trust. The tribunal will keep pushing, she said. They want blood to prove their law still has teeth. They want your brother's temper to prove themselves right. Don't give it to them. You ask as if it were simple. It isn't. The first time you set me up for show, the next choices won't belong to you. He studied her face. The bond held still with him. He wasn't a man who hid behind a rush of words. He let the quiet test them both. A thread brushed the back of her mind, thin as a hair pulled through fog. Elara, Ryland. The old pack web had thinned since the stones. It held like wire stretched to song. I'm here. Report. Bound. Watching. Not broken. A softer warmth slid along the same wire. Rosemary and clean linen even through distance. Hold your breath low when the pull spikes, Mirren sent. I've got a brew for bond sickness. We'll lay it near the creek if there's a window. You can't cross, no. But hands reach under fences when they need to. Ryland again clipped. Scouts beyond the East Grove, they want to charge. I won't give them the rush. The thread flickered and held. Elara swallowed against the ache the link left in her teeth. Draven looked toward the window with the same attention she had. He couldn't hear the link, but he felt the way she breathed through it. What did he say? That he won't give your elders what they want. Then he's wiser than they hoped. They'll try another angle. They already have. He led her back into wind and torch smoke. Wolves watched as they crossed the yard. They climbed to the long balcony that looked over the pines. The storm dragged a torn cloud over the valley. The air smelled of damp timber, oiled steel, old rain, his skin. She stood near enough to feel the sound of his breath against her ribs. "You are not safe here," he said. "I can keep most jaws off you, not all. I wasn't safe at the creek. When the creek had your name, this place has mine. And my wrist." His gaze dropped to the mark. Heat moved through the bond, slow and certain. The nerves near it seemed to lean toward his hand even without touch. Her mouth went dry. "You think I don't know what I did," he said. "You knew. And you think I regret it. You don't." His jaw shifted. "Not the way you want." Wind shouldered the balcony. She steadied herself on the rail. He turned slightly, taking the brunt of it without making it a gesture. Warmth reached her without contact. The bond burned low. Not hunger. Not hunger. "We could let him closer and still keep our teeth," her wolf breathed. She wanted proof and hated that she wanted it. "Look at me," he said, and she did. He didn't hunt her mouth. He looked into her eyes like he had in the yard, as if checking whether she would blink or burn. The bond tightened until breath was all the world. Heat rose along her collarbone. The mark answered. The old pack wire sang once and held. He lifted a hand, knuckles under her jaw, light contact that undid her knees more than force would have. She swayed. He didn't pull her in. The pause between them became a small world. Her fingers curled around the rail to keep from leaning into heat she told herself she did not want. A horn cut the air from the east wall, and not practice, not a drill. The kind you use when bodies move through your trees in numbers. Another horn took it from the south tower. The yard answered with feet and metal. The bond flared bright and clean. He drew back a fraction. The softness stepped aside. The alpha took its place with no strain at all. "Your brother," he said. "Or someone borrowing his scent." Another horn. Wolves flowed from shadows into places worn by habit. The tribunal slid into the courtyard like weather, cloaks lifting, faces smooth as ice, eyes bright with a hunger that had nothing to do with meat. He turned to the stairs. The bond tugged and loosened like a line in a current. Elara gathered her breath and followed to the head of the steps. He looked back once. No apology, no promise. Only the truth of a man who would be what he must until the moment changed. "Stay off the walls," he said. "If they try to move you, come to where I am. And if I can't see you, you'll feel me." It wasn't comfort, it was true. She took it. "Don't make a speech," she said. The corner of his mouth tilted and was gone. He went down. The bond trailed through the yard like a cord she could hold if she didn't panic. She stayed on the balcony, hands on the rail, eyes on the tree line where the pines breathed in long, dark waves. The wire to Moonvale thrummed once. "Hold," Ryland sent. She let her breath settle low the way Mirian had taught her. The horns called again, and the world moved from before to beginning. Steel rang against steel at the east gate, a hard, bright sound that traveled the stones. The bond burned through her bones bright as if it had found wind, and Elara knew that whatever waited past this moment would mark more than skin. The horns rolled across the ridge and the stronghold rose to meet them. Wolves flowed from shadow to wall walk, the yard tightening into lines worn into bone by repetition. The tribunal stepped from the eaves, cloaks lifting in the wind, pale scar marks catching torchlight. Smoke leaned under the bruise-colored sky. The storm pressed, refusing to break. The bond tugged when Draven moved. It wasn't a yank, it was heat finding cold. Elara felt his attention swing to the east gate and then come back to her like a hand checking a heartbeat. He crossed the yard. Wolves parted. The chain on her wrist whispered once and went still. An elder's voice cut thin and dry. Witness. Draven stopped at arm's length. The yard quieted as if the ground had exhaled, and waited to see what shape the breath would return in. Wind slid cold along Elara's throat. She stood unshifted, spine straight, mouth dry. The half-ring of wolves faced inward, every gaze steady. Confirm the claim, the elder said. Draven didn't look away. The bond vibrated low, a string tuned to his breath. He could have let the horns pull him to the wall and delayed the moment. He did not. Now. The word landed like a stone dropped into still water. Rage rose, so did heat. Elara's wolf paced inside her ribs, tail high, eyes bright. Not prey. He crossed the last space between them and didn't lift the chain. He reached bare-handed, laid his palm along the side of her neck, fingers warm over her pulse, thumb near the hinge of her jaw. His skin was pine and smoke and a clean metal note that lived under the others. The touch broke a quiet place inside her and the bond surged like water finding a cut. Torches, wolves, Tribunal all went to the edge of her sight. She knew only the weight of his breath, the fixed calm of his body in the air, the exact placement of his mouth when he lowered it and set teeth to the line where neck meets shoulder. Not a tear. A binding bite measured to hold instead of maim. Pain flashed bright and clean, and with it a flood that softened her knees, heat spreading from the mark through nerves, curling low, climbing her skull like a rising hum. Her wolf reared and gave no word at all. Mine and not mine crashed and fused into something older than either. Her hands shook. Her breath came as sound in her own ears. Draven's low growl lived in his chest, controlled a straight line, rather than a snarl. The bond slammed wide. Tastes and textures rushed through with no order. Ice on timber, iron in a split lip, the ash of banked coals, dawn air before sound. A mind trained to move cleanly over rough ground without wasting steps. Under it, the ache of a hunger he had taught himself to ignore until it turned and took a name he could not. He lifted his mouth. Heat lived where he had been, a small sun under skin. The bond didn't recede. It thrummed. Wolves exhaled in a low, single breath around the yard. The elders watched with ledger eyes. Done, the elder said. Elara's balance wavered. She drew breath low until the ground steadied. Torches spat. Metal rang on the wall. Her wrist felt too tight, and then not tight enough. She wanted the chain off. She wanted it on because it had been between his hand and her skin. Fury and humiliation burned, separate colors that looked the same. She met his gaze and found no triumph there. Only the steadiness of a choice stood in. Wind lifted hair at her nape and touched the new mark. Heat answered as if the air had learned his name. Ryland struck the thin wire of the old pack link like a blade on a bell. Elara. Here. Report. Marked. Silence held for a breath, cold and flat as creek stones. Breathe low, don't meet the pull head-on. Let it slide and miss its grip. Mirain brushed the same thread, warmth tucked in the edges. A bundle waits under the south juniper. Brew for the spin. Salve for the bite. Layer it light. Don't press deep. You can't cross. Hands reach under fences. The thread thinned, not broken, drawn to song. Elara opened her eyes and everything looked truer, because she had closed them. The mark beat with her pulse. Draven's focus tilted outward, toward the east. An elder's chin lifted. Take her inside. Draven didn't shift his gaze. She goes where I place her. A short bark from the wall carried count. Movement in the trees, not a rush. The yard shifted another notch toward war. Draven crooked 2 fingers at the scarred wolf who had held the chain before. The man stepped in with an open hand. No grab. Direction only. Elara moved when the chain suggested, because tearing free would buy the Tribunal a show she refused to give. Draven's eyes followed until distance forced the bond to work, to keep their pulses near each other. Even split between her, the wall, and the wolves, the line stayed taut. The tower room held thick stone and a narrow window on the inner yard. A basin stood on a stand, water still. A leather loop hung from a peg, not a chain. A question. The scarred wolf placed the basin just inside the door and a small wooden cup beside it. He glanced at her shoulder and kept his eyes respectful. He drew the bolt outside. The soft click felt final. Elara held the table until her fingers prickled. The mark pounded with heat that forgot how to stop. She counted her breaths until they evened. Her wolf lay along her spine like a hot iron cooling, awake, guarding. We did not bow, we did not run. We couldn't, we stepped. We did, regret. The thought sat in her mouth like a thorn. She didn't bite it. The wolf's ear twitched once. The bond tugged again with Draven's path across the yard. He climbed to the wall. She felt the set of his palms on stone as if the keep were a map of her skin, and he laid his hands on it. It wasn't sight through his eyes. It was the pattern of him drawn inside her by contact and kept. She stripped the leather from her wrist and slid the chain off. It lay on the table, like a shed skin. The crescent bite had stopped bleeding. The sight of it pulled in two directions. Hide it. Touch it until the room tilted. Drink, Miriam had told her, keep the belly lined. Elara crouched, filled the cup, swallowed careful mouthfuls of water that tasted of smoke and iron. Her stomach steadied. The heat from the mark became a steady hum. A bright pulse went through the bond as Draven leaned into the stones and his pack leaned with him. The east gate creaked and held. Whoever moved in the pines counted torches and waited. Ryland's voice slid down the wire like pine pitch. We have your bundle. Haim carried it to the water. It sits under the juniper. Haim. Alive. Her legs eased. She pictured freckles and soot where a boy had tried to blur them. Her throat burned. Ryland's presence steadied. He sent only one more line. Do not let them teach you to flinch. She laughed without sound, as if flinching were a skill to choose. Heat lifted through the bond. Draven's focus turned briefly from the parapet. The attention he didn't spend on the wall touched her like a hand laid flat on her ribs. The tremor that ran through her wasn't fair. She gripped the mattress and let it pass, mouth full of the idea of him. Stop, she told the empty room. The room had no ears. The bond had will. She set her forehead to the cold stone of the window. The chill numbed the heat a little. Below, runners cut lines between stair and gatehouse. Wolves held their places. The tribunal stood as if winter had put them there. She could feel argument in the bond without hearing words. A push for spectacle, for her on a wall. Draven's refusal, heavy enough to change the room. Knuckles brushed the bolt, not a fist, a touch. Open, she said. The bolt slid. The scarred wolf entered with a clay jar and a small wrapped bundle. He set both on the table. Up close, the bare fat scent rose from the salve. Pine and fat, he said, seal against wind. Layer this over whatever your healer sent. Bare fat stinks. It keeps cold out. He tipped his chin to the leather loop. You won't run. If you try, you'll break things you didn't mean to. What's your name? Varek. You caught the chain. I caught it when it slipped. He laid a folded scrap on the table. Your healer wrote your name. The ink ran, but it holds. Elara touched the paper and felt heat rush to her eyes. She didn't open it. The fact of it worked on her ribs. Thank you. He nodded and withdrew. The bolt clicked. She unwrapped the bundle. Dried fruit, a heel of bread, a twist of salt, a leather flask that smelled faintly of bitter herb. One careful mouthful warmed her belly. The nausea lifted a notch. She spread Marian's salve in a thin sheen along the bite, willow and mint cutting the heat. When it sank, she brushed Nightfangs over it. The bear fat did stink. It sealed the air out. She hated that it helped. Dark shouldered the window. The storm hunched and watched. The horns kept their silence. Whatever moved beyond the trees learned what it came to learn, or failed and withdrew to plan again. Draven was no longer on the wall. He moved along the walk, down to speak with a runner, back to the yard. Elara followed the line of him as if the keep had hung a thread through her and tied him there. Closing her eyes made him brighter. Opening them did not dim it. Mercy was not built into this. Fact was, she lay on the bed with her head on her arm and listened to the place breathe. A nail clicked in the wall when wind pushed right. A torch guttered and caught. Boots passed below. The bond hummed. She hated it. She curled toward it. The two truths lay together and made something like hunger. Her wolf watched the door, guard and witness. "He is not in the room," that voice said, low and sure. "He is under your skin anyway." "I know. It frightens you. It angers me. It will do both until you choose which to feed." She stared at the mortar lines until they looked like rivers. The bite ached cleanly. The salves cooled, then warmed with her pulse. The leather loop hung like a question she had already answered by not lifting it. A pressure touched her mind that was not the old pack thread, not Ryland's wire, not Miriam's gentle palm. A new path, unscarred. It smelled like slow-burning pine and iron cooled in snow. It waited, rather than pressed. "Elara," not spoken aloud, not heard with ears, present. Her body recognized it as feet recognize a track walked twice. She didn't answer. The presence drew back an inch, learned the refusal, and stayed near. Heat pooled and spread. She pressed the heel of her hand into her ribs until breath returned. She had hoped that after the yard and the bite and the balcony where wind had moved her, she would find a corner the bond could not fill. There wasn't one. Even the window's stone held his warmth now. Water veins in the ceiling made pale paths. The storm shouldered the tower. Wood creaked. The bond reached again, the simple attention of a leader counting his wolves in the dark and making sure the one he had marked still breathed on the other side of a wall. She wanted to shove it away. Her hand lifted instead, useless against air. "Go," she whispered. The presence withdrew by a fraction. It didn't vanish. The hum stayed. The mark pulsed. Boots and metal ghosted through stone. The tribunal's stillness weighted the yard. The pack held, teeth sheathed, ready. Draven's breath steadied between orders. Elara felt him threaded through all of it. She knew with a quiet that hurt that she would feel him whether the keep slept or burned. Whether he stood 10 paces from her or a valley between. He had left the room. He had not left her. The knowledge rose like a tide that erases shoreline without splash or horn. She turned her face into her arm and breathed through the sound that wanted to break loose. He was nowhere in the tower, and under her skin all at once. The rules had changed at the stones and again under torches. No one writing it. She lay still until the drums in her blood eased. When she opened her eyes, the truth waited like a figure in a doorway that would not step aside. She felt him even when he was gone. Dawn didn't cut cleanly. It smudged the window with a thin gray that made the room feel half awake. Elara lifted her head from her arm. The mark along her neck pulsed with a steady warmth that matched her heartbeat. A reminder, traced into skin. The old moon veil thread pressed faintly at the edge of her mind, so thin she could have snapped it with a careless thought. She let it be and sat up slow. Her body was light and wrong at once. The brew Miraine sent last night had eased the spin, but bond sickness didn't care about sleep. Heat rose under her ribs and drifted into her throat before settling. She swung her legs off the bed and waited until the floor steadied under her bare feet. Her wolf lay long along her spine, awake and listening. Not undone. Marked. Both true. The bolt slid. A tray eased through and the door shut again. Varek's shadow moved away. On the tray, a rough cup of broth, a heel of bread, 2 dried apple halves, and a folded scrap with damp edges. Rosemary cut through the room. Miraine's scent lived in the paper. Elara opened it carefully. The ink had run, but the strokes held their shape. Line your belly before the heat climbs. Breathe low, think like the creek. Do not press salve into the bite. Layer thin. Balance will fail on the third stair after a surge. Touch the rail there. Ryland is close enough to taste their cook smoke, far enough to make them guess. The last curve under her name looked like a bad day smile. Elara folded the scrap, tucked it under the tray edge, and drank. Salt warmed her mouth. The bread was dry and right. She ate in 3 bites and breathed easier. The bond tightened like a hand checking a pulse and eased again. Stone didn't blunt it. Distance didn't soften it. It wasn't comfort or threat. It simply existed, as constant as breath. Draven's focus lived elsewhere. Yet part of it brushed her and drew back like a palm-testing fever without waking the patient. Boots moved beyond the door. Low voices. The keep's old hinges never cried. Someone kept them smooth. She went to the window. Courtyard pale, gate shut. Smoke from cook fires lifting straight in windless air. She didn't need eyes to know where Draven stood. The long hall. The heavy black table cut from a single trunk. The tribunal around it like winter at the edge of a field. Pressure worked through the bond the way thunder speaks through a wall. The elders pushed for spectacle. Draven refused with a single line that did not bend. The thread from Moonvale brushed her mind. Ryland. Clean and clipped. I'm here. We have the east gate from the ridge. Do nothing if they raise a banner. That will be a play for you, not for us. I can hold it. You always liked that word, and it fits. Rosemary reached along the same wire. Mirain's quiet moved into her chest like warm hands. Eat again when you can. Breathe low when your skin heats. No cold water to fight a surge. It will turn your stomach. Elara almost smiled. Being told not to gulp water like a pup felt like mercy. She sent a small nod down the link and let it loosen before it thinned to pain. Footsteps stopped. The bolt slid. Varric leaned into the frame, steadying the doorway with his shoulder as if offering a post. Council wants you in the lower hall. For a show. For proof you stand when the bond pulls. And Draven. He asked for a hall instead of a wall. He watched her face to be sure she was steady. She followed into the stairwell. The third step tugged her balance the way Mirain warned. She touched the rail, let the sway pass, kept moving. Torch smoke and damp stone breathed up the shaft. Old places learn patience, Mirain used to say. The keep had that in its bones. The practice hall stretched long and low, floor scored with claws and bare heels, sand baskets in corners to drink blood before it found the cracks. Weapon doors lined one wall. Elara read reach and balance in their shapes without needing names. Draven stood near the far end. The tribunal waited by the door, 3 figures cut from frost. 2 Nightfang wolves watched from shadow. Draven's gaze caught her like gravity. Plain black shirt rolled at the forearms trousers. Bare feet on wood. The pale slash along his ribs lifted with breath. He raised his hand. Not greeting. Measurement. Elara crossed the room. Her ribs loosened around air 3 beats at a time. The elder with the longest pale scar turned his head a finger width. She stands. Standing is not endurance, another answered. It is a start. The third murmured, eyes bright in a way that didn't care if something broke during the lesson. Draven traced a circle in dust with his foot. Here. Elara stepped into it. The circle was smaller than she liked. Close let heat edge over heat and left no space to lie to herself. Let it sharpen, he said. Don't build a wall. It crawls under walls. I know. Prove it. He took 1 pace in, then another. Her wolf rose without sound, awake from the first step, silent by the second. The bond climbed along Elara's jaw like a hand unsure whether to press. Her mouth went dry. Breathe, Draven said. Low. She kept her eyes on his. He put 2 fingers to the mark, only wait. Heat ran her spine and pooled low. Her knees went loose, and then obeyed. She stayed planted. Her wolf showed teeth and did not lunge. The elders watched. Varric shifted, counting exits he would not be given permission to use. Draven's wolf filled the room, not a shift, a presence. Amber hid low in his eyes. His breath slowed the air like a heavy stone calming river surface. Elara's wolf stepped forward in that made space, nose to nose. No lowered gaze, no high tail. The harder thing, waiting. Let him lean. Keep your feet. Draven lifted his hand. Absence bit harder than contact. He'd let heat through her, and then made her carry her own weight. Training and cruelty wore the same face today. You won't fall, he said. You don't know that. You never have. The bond tightened again. She set her teeth against the lift in her chest that almost turned to a laugh. She refused to give the room that sound. An elder stepped closer. Enough circles. Run her with us at moonrise. If she keeps the line, you have your answer. If she lags, you have theirs. What I have is my pack, Draven said. It will learn on my terms. They need to see the thing you took, the elder said. They need to know where it fits. They will see, Draven answered, without a stage. Elara didn't move. The pull turned like tide-feeling shoreline. She let it slide and miss where it could. Where it couldn't, she breathed. Varric's chin dipped once, small approval. Draven stepped back. Air returned to the circle. The wolves in shadow resettled. Water, he said. Varric filled a cup from the bucket. Elara drank slow. She didn't look at Draven while she swallowed, and still his attention made it feel like more than water. The tribunal peeled from the wall together. One paused at the door, eyes like ice under torchlight. Hunt at moonrise whether or not your brother brings banners. Bring her into it, or keep her contained and feed whispers. Choose which hunger feeds you. They left. The hall breathed again. Draven watched the door until the last boot faded, then turned to Elara. You won't run. No. You won't be paraded. No. You will be seen. She let the bond settle before answering with a small nod. Come, he said. No eyes. Varric opened a far door into a short passage. The small room beyond had a low table, 2 stools, a bowl, a folded linen square. The air smelled less of smoke, more of wood, and the clean metal note that clung to Draven. He closed the door with his palm. The space shrank to breath. He drew his shirt over his head in one clean motion. Scars mapped his skin, some thin, some puckered. One long line ran from the top of his shoulder toward his heart and stopped hard, as if the blade had met bone that refused it. What did that? Elara asked before she considered silence. An oath-breaking, he said. A winter I learned how much weight a man can still carry after he drops the most important. What did you drop? Trust. He didn't reach for her. He stood and let her look. Honesty had its own heat. Weapon, too. Her wolf went very quiet and listened. He dipped the linen into the bowl and ran it along the long scar with the care of a ritual done too many times to think about. The movement was plain. It felt like seeing him breathe. You watch me like a different answer hides under the obvious one, he said. Maybe there is. There isn't. You want me to hate you so you can manage me. No. Then what? I want you to know the thing you fight and the thing that fights for you may wear the same face. He dropped the linen and crossed the space. Heat climbed her arms. The mark hummed and settled. Breathe, he said, and I am. Again. She did. The need to lean reached through muscle like a wave that knows the shore. She kept her feet. The urge crested, fell, came back softer, fell again. He lowered his head until his mouth hovered near her ear and stopped. His voice was almost only breath. Your brother will charge if he sees a dais. He won't. He will if I allow it. Don't. I won't. He straightened. The room grew. The drumbeat inside her moved behind a door. They left the cell. In the practice hall, Varric had drawn a line of sand and swept debris into neat piles. He lifted his chin, a question answered by Draven without words. They crossed the yard. Eyes tracked them without hostility or welcome, wolves storing information for later. The smell of fat and char climbed from the cook fires. Hunger came like something normal for once. At the stair to the tower, Draven stopped with his hand on the rail and looked up through the slice of sky between keep and wall. The bruise of cloud had thinned to a pale smear. He looked back at her, and then passed her shoulder to the inner yard, as if laying a board and marking cuts. "Tonight they run," he said. "If I keep you inside, the story will write itself wrong. And if you take me out there, it will be the right danger. You could be wrong. I don't get to wait for certainty. You chose that when you marked me. I chose that before I knew your name." He started up. At the third step, she brushed the rail. He paused and pretended to study a nick in the stone, giving her a heartbeat. She took it because pride doesn't set broken bones, and because Miriam had warned her about this exact stair. In the room, he studied the leather loop on the peg and her bare wrist on the table. He did not reach for either. "Eat again," he said. "Sleep if you can. I'll pull you when the run calls. If the elders move you first, follow Varric, not their words." He turned. The bond tugged and eased like a line in slow water. Elara's mouth opened before she weighed it. "You will not put me on a wall. No. You will not make me bait for a speech. No. You'll run with me. Yes." The door closed. No bolt. Either trust, design, or a test. She ate because Miriam told her to. She lay down when heat climbed because breath comes easier, horizontal. She woke to afternoon pressed thin against the glass, light that makes loud places quiet. Below, Draven crossed the yard. The bond set his pace against her ribs. The tribunal pressed at him with words she couldn't hear. He refused without ones she could. Pressure and release told enough. Ryland brushed the thread. Pine pitch and river rock cut clean through distance. No boasting. He never needed it. "We are here, and I know." Holding. Dusk moved toward the keep with a hunter's patience. A runner knocked once and passed Varric a narrow strip smudged in blue chalk. Varric carried it in and set it on the table. "Run mark," he said. "We draw a line on throats at moonrise." "What does it do?" "Nothing. It lets us count breath when speed blurs edges." He dipped 2 fingers and waited. Elara lifted her chin. He drew one clean line across her throat. Cool. For once, nothing burned. The bond tightened with Draven's call. No words. It didn't need them. The yard shifted underfoot as the pack formed. Elara stood. The world steadied more than she expected. Varric tied her hair back with a leather strip that didn't pinch. "Ready?" he asked. "Ready." They took the stairs. The third step didn't take her balance. The yard spread under a sky the color of drowned steel. Wolves gathered near the gate, bodies low, eyes clear. The tribunal stood near the arch like carved weather. Draven waited at the front, bare feet on earth, the old scar a pale river under failing light. He looked at Elara once, not an order, not a question. Something between. No horn. This wasn't a charge. The gate opened. Cool air moved. Draven stepped. The pack flowed. Elara slid into that movement, and the bond rose to meet the ground. Her wolf came up to her mouth and put the words there without sound. "Keep your feet. Keep your breath. Keep your teeth." Elara nodded once and took the first line of trees. The keep fell behind like a thought not worth saying. The earth learned their rhythm and held it. Heat lived where she needed it. The night pulled a thin dark over the path and the running began. The gate gave way to trees and the ground gathered under our feet as if it had been waiting. The first birch took the last of the torchlight off our fur. Elara's body knew what to do. Bones slid, Skin warmed. The shift came like a deep breath taken in the right weather. Pain didn't rip so much as stretch, joints finding old memory. Wolf vision opened the woods the way dawn opens fields. Scent flared. The bond heated and steadied. Draven's presence moved ahead and slightly left, a weight that cleared a path through the air. The pack set a pace used for distance, not display. No horns, no howling for show. Low bodies, even breathing. Pause placed to spare the land and the lungs. Stay with the second line, Elara. The voice lived in the mind link the mark had opened. It didn't scrape. It filled. She answered with breath, and found herself sliding into the rhythm between Varek and a wolf with a black stripe down the shoulder. The stripe wolf flicked an ear. Welcome without words. Varek's pace adjusted a fraction to cover her right flank. Keep your feet, keep your breath, keep your teeth. Her wolf was close enough to speak without sound. The world narrowed to ground and wind and the warm line of Draven's attention cutting through tall grass. The pack mind link brushed her skin now and then, a tide just outside her reach. It wasn't hers to swim. Not yet. Draven pulled the whole current when he needed it. It bent around him like water around stone. They took a creek at a shallow point. Cold bit and slid away. The chalk line at Elara's throat cooled and stayed. A tangle of alder tried to snag her flank. She tucked and lengthened and threaded it, breath even. The bond pulsed as if approving. Draven touched her mind again, lighter this time. 2 rises. Watch the second. Loose shale. She was tempted to pretend she had seen it. Pride is a sharp toy. Instead, she answered with a brief push of gratitude and felt the acknowledgement return, like a hand back from a ledge. Nightfang ran in a shape that wasted nothing. The young kept toward the center. The old wolves eased the outer edges, not because they were slow, but because they were clever enough to read wind and ground for trouble that wasn't on the path. Every few breaths, the alpha reached the pack and tuned it like a hand turning a peg. The tempo changed without visible signal. He did it again at the second ridge. The shale tried to take her. Draven's warning turned her foot before it slipped, and she cleared the ridge with nothing worse than a small clip at the ankle. Varek tipped his head and went on without breaking stride. The striped wolf brushed her flank once and placed himself a body length farther to guard the edge. The scent of Moonvale arrived without warning, clean as river rock. Elara's lungs tightened on the smell. Not fresh enough to be Ryland, fresh enough to have been laid tonight by scouts running close. The old pack thread sang once in the back of her head. She didn't reach for it. Reaching might snap it. Left arc. No contact. Draven folded the command across Nightfang minds. Bodies adjusted. Heads lifted. Feet placed for quiet. Elara followed the switch and felt the pull of her old home where the trail crossed. Familiar as a childhood creek you can find in the dark. A young Nightfang scent rose not far off, hot and high. Too eager. Steady, Bran. A low whine through the link answered. Bran's pace held. Elara breathed, grateful in a way she didn't know what to name. The trail bent through a stand of fir. Needles muffled their bodies. The scent of Moonvale brushed the hair along Elara's spine. Pine pitch, river cold, the low musk of a she-wolf she had drilled with last winter. Memory made her muscles want to turn toward it. The bond tightened to keep her path true. It didn't force. It held. The ground opened to a glade fringed with stones that might have been placed or might have grown that way. Draven slowed, and Nightfang rippled around him in 2 wheels, outer and inner, breath fading to silence. He stood long enough to read what wind and ground would tell, then stepped off toward the east. The pack broke and followed. We're not hunted, we're marked. Elara's wolf read the lines with her. She could feel the deliberate scuff in the earth where a Moonvale patrol had crossed earlier, not caring whether Nightfang found the print. It wasn't a challenge. It was a message. We see you. We count you. We can read how you move. You smell Ryland, not his weight, his ways. Good. He didn't waste words on the mind link tonight. He left signs where they counted and let Nightfang do the math. It was how a leader asks for patience without bowing. The run took them through a narrow notch where wind always tasted like iron. Elara put her paws where Varric did, and kept her flank out of the bite. The chalk line at her throat cooled further. A little later, the pack strung into a long curve through a stand of young birches. White trunks blurred. The ground was kind. Breath held steady. Draven's presence shifted back and ran level with Elara for the space of 10 heartbeats. He didn't touch her mind. He shadowed her, weight steady, pace perfectly tuned to hers. It felt like being measured against something honest. When he slid forward again, the bond warmed the way a hand keeps heat on your skin after it lifts. Moon lifted above the ridgeline and turned stones to the pale of bones in shallow stream. Elara caught the smell of a hare breaking cover and let it pass. Hunger rose straight and clean, the kind that doesn't confuse itself with other needs. She filed it for later and stayed with the line. The pack didn't chase every bright thing at its feet. It moved for distance and pattern and the long teeth of winter. The first test came on a canted slope where frost lived deeper than it should have. A young wolf slipped and started to tumble. Elara cut her angle and shouldered the youngster back into a run before the slide bit. Draven's approval brushed her mind. No words. A pulse. The youngster's tail lowered in shame for 2 strides, and then found the rhythm again. Nightfang didn't waste time on long apologies. They crossed a minor border of cairnstones. The air changed the way it does on the far side of a closed door. Elara's coat prickled in a way that couldn't be blamed on cold. Nightfang territory went older here. She hadn't known that was possible. The ground held a memory under the topsoil that tasted like old iron, and old vows both. Draven moved, as if that taste lived in his blood. The scent of Moonvale rose again closer, a body behind Holly. 2. Watching. Elara's heart jumped into her throat. She didn't slow. Draven's mind pressed against hers, not blocking, not softening, only present. Don't look. Let them look. She kept her muzzle forward and placed her feet. The watchers didn't twitch. They let Nightfang run through their pocket of observation and kept their notes. A small sound reached her ear then, a breath catching. It was human, not wolf. A boy, too new to this kind of night. Heim. Elara almost broke pace. Pride is a sharp toy, and so is love. Draven's presence sharpened against hers with a warning that wasn't unkind. The boy's scent faded under fur. Varric edged half a body closer in case Elara's foot wanted to forget the ground. It didn't. She placed it where it belonged and went on. The pack swung back toward the keep as the night thinned. The run didn't end with a sprint. It ended with a long glide that let muscles release without tearing. When they came under the walls, Draven broke into 2 legs without drama. Fur slid to skin. Elara followed suit, breath fogging, body hot and chilled at once. Varric threw her a short cloak and she caught it on the second try. The chalk line across her throat had turned pale blue. The yard held its quiet. Wolves moved into pairs and left the gate to the guards. No howls, no drama to feed. The tribunal watched from under the eaves, still as trees cut for a winter that never ends. Elara felt their eyes on the chalk line and the mark. She didn't give them her face long enough to save her. Draven's gaze caught her once, a straight look that passed through pride and possession to something leaner. He didn't move toward her. He turned toward the inner stair, and the bond tugged her in the same direction, without dragging. Varric fell in a few paces behind, neither chaperone nor shadow, just the right set of eyes to deter the wrong ones. They reached the small room where wood and clean metal lived in the air instead of smoke. Draven did not bolt the door. He didn't close the distance either. He stood with his back to the wall and let the night fall out of his shoulders. Sit. Elara stayed standing until standing felt like a way to make herself faint. She sat on the low stool, cloak heavy over her knees, pulse still stepping down from the run. The mark along her neck warmed and cooled warm again. She kept focus on breath and on the weight of the wood under her palms. Pack saw you run, Draven said. They will pass that instead of the story the elders hope to feed them. They watched me not fall. They watched you keep the line. He poured water and set the cup within reach. The old injuries along his ribs mended differently in each place. Some lay flat. Some pulled skin. She found herself mapping them without permission. Why here feels older, she asked, past the cairns. Nightfang was carved there by a Wynther we still owe. Who do you owe? The dead. He didn't look at her when he said it. The bond shifted. She felt the gravity of those Wynthers pull through him like a tide that hadn't been satisfied. You kept the young from tumbling, he added after a moment. Bran. He found his feet. He will remember yours. Silence lived a while. It wasn't awkward. It held. Your scouts watched us, he said, and I know. One of them breathed wrong. I know. Your brother will read the path we took and the way we held pace near the holly. He will know I chose not to pull you to the front. You could have. I could have. I chose not to turn the run into a lesson he couldn't ignore. You expect a thank you? No. He moved finally, crossing to the table where a clay jar waited. He opened it and the scent of bear fat and pine lifted. He set the jar down and opened another. Willow and mint. He held both up in a small question. Elara gave him a slight nod. He layered the Nightfang salve thin over the Moonveil one along the edge of the bite, careful not to press. His fingers were warm, steady, impersonal in technique, not in effect. Heat spilled under her skin in answer. The bond caught it and reflected it back. Her wolf opened one eye, amused and annoyed at the same time. You are a fire and a fool. He rinsed his hands in the bowl and dried them on linen. The room seemed to breathe easier after that small ritual. You fought the pull without hard walls, Rhinoceros, he said. You did what I asked. You asked me to stand in a circle while you put your fingers on the thing you made. Yes. She waited for anger to sharpen that into something louder. It didn't. The run had burned off the first edge of fury and left the steel beneath. You keep trying to teach me things I didn't ask to learn, she said. I keep trying to keep you alive in a place that wants you for proof. Proof of what? That an alpha's teeth can rewrite a story the whole forest thought was fixed. He let the sentence settle, then added quieter. And proof to myself that I am not my father. She looked up. The words mattered because he didn't posture around them. They came from a quieter room in him, the one that did its work when torchlight went out. What did he do the Wynther you owe? He chose to teach the pack to eat its own before it starved. The line made her stomach go cold the way a wind off snow does. He didn't elaborate. He didn't need to. The shape of the scars down his ribs added footnotes she didn't want. Do not romanticize me, he said. I am what I've had to be. But I will not be that. Your tribunal would. They would call it a lesson about the cost of law. I would call it failure. Elara's hands had turned fists without her noticing. She opened them and watched color return to her knuckles. The mark pulsed in a slow wave that matched the tempo of his breath without meaning to. A tremor ran along the old Moonveil wire then. A small plucked note. Ryland. Close. Quiet. He didn't push words. He sent a single picture. The creek bend under the juniper where Mirayan's bundle had been left, now covered by a drift of last year's leaves. He was telling her it was still there. He was telling her he could take it back if she couldn't reach it. I can reach. Do not break anything you can't mend. I won't. The thread thinned again until it was mostly ache. Her eyes burned. She swallowed it down. Draven watched her without stepping closer. He could feel the wire, too. Not its words, only the way her breath altered around it. He is nearer. He is. Then the elders will push harder. They already are. He leaned on his palms at the edge of the table. The veins in his forearms rose. His wolf stood behind his eyes and didn't blink. They asked for a dais again after the run, he said. They wanted you under a banner. You refused. I told them the pack had already seen what it needed. I told them if they wanted spectacle, they could hang their own names from a wall. And if they build it anyway, I will take it down. Then they will call you soft. They can call me anything they like so long as they keep their teeth sheathed when I ask. Her laugh surprised both of them. It wasn't warm. It carried a tiny crack where fear hid. You think I am soft, he said. I think you are hard enough to know where hardness turns to waste. He turned his head as if listening to a sound only he could hear, and then looked back. The bond shifted cooler. Duty shouldered back in front of whatever else the room had been holding. Eat again, he said. Sleep if you can. When the second bell goes, I'll pull you to the training yard. I want your feet to learn the place with daylight in it, not only torches. And if the elders come first, Varric will stand in the door. If they push past him, I'll break their day and deal with the cost. He reached for the latch and paused. The distance between his hand and the wood was small and full of a thing neither of them had words for yet. Do not go to the wall, he added. If you need air, take the balcony. I'm not going to run. I didn't say you would. The wall puts people in you cannot choose not to look at. He left. The door didn't bolt. Varric's shadow moved past once and then disappeared down the stair. Elara rinsed her hands, ate what Varric had tucked on the shelf, and lay down because Mirian's scrap told her to trust the simple things. Sleep came in slips and returned as often as it left. Each time it brought a picture she had not invited. Snow to the knee, a boy with a blade too heavy for his arm refusing to lower his eyes, a long table cut from a single tree, and a hand hitting it hard enough to make it drum. A winter choice that had not been forgiven. When she woke fully, the light through the narrow window had turned the color of metal dipped in water. The yard below moved quietly. The tribunal had gone inside to draw up whatever performance would fail next. The pack moved as packs do when a run has given them steadiness. Breath measured, ears easy, the right kind of tired. The bond found her again, not sharp, present. Draven was on the inner stair, a step from the turn. He didn't open the mind link to speak. He didn't need to. The attention set itself under her skin and made breath longer. We are not undone, her wolf said. Not undone, not free. Both true, both true. The thought settled like a weight that didn't crush. She stood and tightened the cloak at her shoulders. She looked once at the leather loop on the peg and left it where it hung. The second bell would come. The training yard would lift its dust. The elders would write and burn drafts of the future and call it law. And the bond would keep heating the room until she chose what to do with it. Cloth rustled in the hall. Varric's knuckles touched the door. He didn't open it. Second bell soon. I'm ready. Don't look at the wall. I won't. Her hand went to the mark, paused and fell. She didn't need to touch it to know it was warm. She didn't need to see him to feel that he had paused on the stair a moment longer than any alpha should. Second bell had barely faded when the keep adjusted to morning. Elara stood by the narrow window and watched the yard collect itself into patterns. Wolves traded drills for chores without fuss. The fountain court kept its own cool, moss damp even in sun. She breathed with the rhythm of work until the tightness under her collarbone loosened. Varric tapped the door and left it unlatched. He didn't step inside. She took the stairs one flight and set herself near the balcony corner where the wall hid her from the training yard's eyes. The air smelled of sun on timber, iron warmed by palms, and the faint bitter of willow from the room where she had crushed leaves into a cup. The bond found her like it always did now, not a knock, a presence that took up its place under her ribs and waited. Draven crossed the inner yard, sleeves rolled, focus clean. When he lifted his head to measure the sky, the mark at her throat beat once as if it recognized the angle of his jaw. He didn't turn toward the balcony, he didn't need to. The link opened just enough to set weight and temperature. Counsel, I know, eat first, I did, good. He shut the link to a hum. She listened to the keep, and the keep gave small truths. The tribunal's tread had no hurry. The kitchen's rhythm was steady. The North Tower sent its runners down with quiet feet. She took the training yard a second time that morning. Varric showed her a sequence on the cambered beam and let her fail once and correct on the next pass. He wasn't generous, and he wasn't unkind. He cared whether she learned because a wolf who doesn't learn makes other wolves pay for it. Draven joined them without breaking stride from counsel. He adjusted a yearling's stance with 2 fingers and turned to Elara as if the turn had always belonged to her. "Foot circle," he said. She stepped in. He drew a pattern with his hand that made her cross and open, cut and retreat. He tightened it until breath went loud and eased it half a beat. The bond stayed level, the way a drum beat does when a hand that knows it keeps the time. The tribunal arrived and took the yard's shade. Their faces didn't change. Their eyes kept score. One lifted a hand. "Your pack wants certainty," he said. "Give them a sign that binds questions shut." Draven didn't look up. Questions feed a pack better than lies. "Not in winter?" "It isn't winter." The elder's mouth tilted and flattened. He folded his hands into his sleeves and held the rest of his words for a place that liked them. Elara finished the pattern and stepped out. Varric brought water. She drank and counted breaths, while Draven's attention widened across the yard and then down into the hall. The bond cooled. Counsel again. He left them and the elders drifted after him like weather that wanted to be believed. Varric tipped his head toward the ladder frame. She climbed hand over hand and dropped lightly, tested her ankles on the chalk lines and learned the yard's corners by feel so when torches returned, her feet would know them in the dark. The bond snapped tight with a bright current that wasn't pain. Draven listened to something sharp and made his choices fast. Elara felt the table drum under his palm. She tasted old iron in the air that meant strangers at the ridge, with cloth they hoped someone would call a banner. The council tried to name the cloth Moonveil. Draven called it what it was. Outsiders leaned at the edges of 2 packs to see who rose first. The elders argued for a stage. Draven set the stage on fire with 3 words, and the argument ended the way a spark ends in rain. Elara stood still under the balcony's thin shade and learned something she hadn't meant to learn. He did not spend temper in rooms where temper bought nothing. He spent it where it moved bodies safely. The respect that rose in her surprised her with its weight. It wasn't admiration. It was the acknowledgement one fighter gives another before either of them draws blood. The old Moonveil wire brushed her mind. Ryland came in quiet, scent of pine pitch and river rock even through distance. "At the South Bend, I feel you. We pulled the bundle so they think you didn't risk. We'll lay another under rain if it comes." "No day isn't good. Holding." The wire thinned to ache. She breathed out until her sight steadied. Varric shifted a step, enough for them to look like guard and charge doing nothing interesting. If anyone watched, the story would serve. The bond warmed a degree. Draven had left the hall. She felt him on the stair a heartbeat before his shadow crossed the courtyard. He came up to the balcony and stopped short of touch. Heat made its own air. "Walk," he said. They took the narrow passage to the small court with the cracked fountain. Water found its own path under moss. Shade lay thick and old. "North Ridge," as he said. Flags without meanings painted on them. "You won't bite." "Not where the elders can taste it." He leaned a shoulder into stone and watched her. The mark warmed under her skin. His mouth had the set it wore when he was counting steps he wouldn't say aloud. The bond moved like a slow tide. "You read me in council," he said. "I didn't try." "It isn't about trying. I saw something. I know." They didn't describe it. She had felt the way a boy learns to hold still while old wolves bruise him and congratulates himself later for surviving his own endurance. He had felt the way she refused to bow to a room, even when it cut air out of her lungs. He lifted a hand and paused at a breath from her jaw. His palm warmed the air. The mark answered once, and settled. She breathed low because she refused to sway. "Your wolf waited," he said. "Not surrender, not challenge. I won't give you an easy story." "Good." Your wolf sits behind your eyes until you choose to let him out. He waits because elders like noise. It makes their mistakes louder. He lowered his hand, the absence had edges. Tonight they'll try again, he said. Hunt with a speech welded to it. You'll split the weld. I will. They returned to the yard. Wolves shifted from drills to tasks. A boy carrying rope kept his eyes down. Draven's gaze softened a breath. The boy's shoulders eased as if a hand had lifted from the back of his neck. Varric met them under the stair and passed a small cloth packet as if it were nothing. Elara took it with the same lie. Dried willow, mint, and a shard of moonveil honey whispered from inside. Consent, not kindness, lived in Draven's glance. Bodies needed what they needed to stand. Dusk bent over the walls. The elders stepped from the hall with faces like polished bone. Draven didn't join them. He stood at the center of the yard and opened the pack link with a tone that settled everything. No hunt. Double watch north. Runners east. Gates quiet. The pack moved. The elders held their empty hands and renamed Obedience Council. Rylan slid close along the wire again, careful as a knife wrapped in cloth. They're not building anything tall. No. Good. At first light, I move scouts 2 valleys and leave ash in our prints. I want them to miscount us hard. They will try to count me. Let them count you wrong. She looked at her wrist where no leather sat. Her scent wasn't Moonveil clean anymore. It wasn't rogue. The middle ground would narrow. The knowledge pinched. I am here, he sent. I know, a hold and holding. Night came without storm or horn. Torches lifted their small suns. Varric set a brazier low in her room and left the door unbolted. The bond found her because it always would. Draven stood on the wall counting lights in trees that weren't stars. His attention left a space for her at the edge. She crushed honey crystal into warm water and let willow and mint steep. The first swallow smoothed her stomach and left warmth that didn't tilt the room. The mark gathered heat and let it go in a steady wave. She lay down without closing her eyes and watched the brazier's light make thin paths on the ceiling. The keep offered small noises, a latch settling, a laugh cut short, boots stopping outside a door and moving on. Her wolf stretched along her and flicked an ear at each until the night had been counted. He will not sleep soon, the wolf said. No, he stands too heavy when he wears calm for other men. I saw. Use that or drown in it. Use it. Sleep came and brought pictures she did not choose. Snow to the knee. A boy with a blade too big for his hand refusing to lower his eyes. A ledger with columns for promises and debts that forgot the names of the men writing them. A long black table drumming under a palm. She woke when the torches dimmed. The bond carried weight that wasn't danger or peace. Draven had left the wall and stood under the eaves where dawn would find him. He didn't climb the stair. He looked at the line where light begins and chose to hold. The old wire brushed her mind. Rylan didn't press words. He pushed the feel of a decision made and owned. She sat up before thought could muddy it. Tell me, if they build the wrong thing in the morning, I break it. The sentence chilled and warmed her at once. It was exactly him. You may have to risk everything. I already do. He let the wire loosen. It didn't snap. The bond hummed louder a moment, as if it had heard and wanted to object. It didn't. It settled to a low thrum. Elara dressed and stood at the window while night let go. The gray that comes first touched stone. The yard shifted with it. Someone coughed into a sleeve. Someone lit tinder twice. A runner missed a step and caught it. The day reached for the keep. Varric's knuckles touched the door. He didn't open it. First light, he said through wood, and I'm ready. Keep off the walls. I will. She took the stair and turned not to the yard but to the narrow court. The fountain's crack shone darker where water had found it. The air there held last night and next morning at once. Draven stepped into the court without sound. He looked at the sky and then at her. The mark warmed. The bond set itself like a weight she had learned the outline of. Outsiders moved west in the dark, he said. They want us to guess wrong. You won't. I'll let them think I have. He stood close without touching. Heat made a small world. He lifted a hand and stopped again, a breath from her jaw. The pause worked on her worse than contact. Breathe, he said. I am. Again. She breathed and steadied. The pull didn't vanish. It obeyed. He lowered his hand, and the absence had teeth. Elders will try the same play, he said. Dais. Speech. Your face held up to bait your brother. Ryland will not charge a stage. He will if I build it for him. You won't. I won't. He left the court and the bond tugged after him. She didn't follow. She watched light find the yard and the edges of the world sharpen. The tribunal came with the swiftness of men who love a plan more than its cost. Workers rolled a frame toward the arch, timber cut and jointed in the night. Draven didn't let them reach the gate. He stepped into the path and put a hand to the frame. The pack felt the link open with a tone that filled bone. Stand. The workers froze. The elders spread their hands with the innocence of men caught with ink on their fingers. Demonstration, one said mildly. Kindling, Draven answered. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't bare teeth. He called 3 wolves by name and set them with their hands to the frame. The timber went back the way it had come. He looked once at the elders' marks, and the air turned colder on their skin. Elara felt the pack take that lesson into the day. It lodged deeper than speeches would have. Ryland brushed the wire once, a quiet that tasted of satisfaction. She didn't send words. He didn't need them. Mid-morning brought quiet that always feels like a held breath. Draven worked the yard until its rhythm sounded like his. He sent runners to the east. He called off a drill when a yearling's paw faltered, rather than drive a point through bone. The elders watched and kept their mouths for once closed. Elara took the ladder and the beams again, moved the foot circle until her lungs warmed and cooled in neat cycles. Varric set a practice blade in her palm and had her feel its balance without swinging it. He looked at her grip and adjusted a finger width. When she nodded, he nodded back. No flourish wasted. Near noon, Draven crossed to the shade and paused where she could feel him. He didn't call her by name. He didn't need to. Walk, he said. They took the passage to the small room where wood and clean metal scented the air. He closed the door with his palm and leaned his back to it. Not trapping, keeping the world out for a breath. You feel me even when I'm not there, he said. Yes, I feel you when I choose not to. You choose not to often. When I can. Why tell me that? Because honesty is cheaper than the trouble the bond makes when we lie to it. He stepped away from the door. The light in the room made the thin scar along his shoulder a pale river again. He reached for the clay jar and opened it. Bare fat and pine lifted. He opened the other. Willow and mint. He held both and waited. She nodded. He layered Moonveil first. Nightfang after, careful as before. Technique, impersonal. Effect not. Heat answered and spread. The bond caught it and gave it back. He rinsed his hands and dried them. He didn't touch her again. He didn't need to. Eat, he said. Rest if you can. When evening comes, I will move you where eyes won't make a stage out of breath. And if they try to build one anyway, I will break it again. He reached for the latch and paused. The space between his hand and the wood held the thing neither of them wanted to name. You think I will give, she said quiet. I think the bond will keep taking until we decide what to do with what it leaves. What if we decide different things? Then the forest will hear about it. He left. The door stayed unbolted. Varric's shadow moved once and passed on. Elara ate what he had left for her and lay down because Moraine would have told her to do the simple thing. She slept in slips. Each time she woke, the bond hummed like a string tuned low. Each time she slept, it brought a picture of Wynther, and the boy who had learned to hold still until the old men ran out of hands. Late afternoon tilted the light. The wire to Moonvale brushed her mind and settled. At dusk I come close enough to see him, Ryland sent. Close enough to make him see me. Don't. I must count the man who holds my sister, and he will smell you when I intend him to. The wire thinned but didn't let go. The bond rose as if it had seen the same intention and set its teeth. Elara stood and tightened the cloak at her shoulders. She crossed to the window and watched the yard lengthen with shadow. Draven stood under the eaves, watching the line where day would end. He didn't move toward her, he didn't have to. She could feel him the way a palm feels a heartbeat through wood. She understood then with a clarity that hurt where breath is supposed to ease you, that the bond would not go quiet. It would only grow heavier, and the choices it asked of her would be the kind that cost packs, not just hearts. Ryland would risk everything because he had always done that without naming it. Draven would refuse stages and build work in their place until someone tried to set fire to both. The first cool of evening slid under the door. The brazier waited cold for later. The fountain court darkened. A runner stumbled and recovered. A banner that had been cut in the night was not there to be unrolled. Elara set her hand to the stone and let the cool climb her arm. She could feel Draven on the yard as clearly as if her palm lay flat against his back. She could feel Ryland on the ridge as clearly as if her fingers had just let go of his sleeve. The distance between those two lines would narrow. It would not do it gently. Dawn found the keep wide awake and cooler than the night. The yard was a calm pulse. Buckets moving, rope coiled, sand brushed smooth over claw marks. Elara stood at the balcony corner and felt the pack watching her in glances that tried not to be glances. Not hostile. Not warm. Curious. As if someone had set an ember on the table and told them to memorize what heat looked like. The bond carried the quiet weight of Draven moving through the long hall. It held the feel of his palm setting itself flat on the black table, the way the wood answered with a dull drum. Pressure folded and unfolded where the tribunal pressed their point. He did not spark. He let their push slide around the line he had already drawn and stand without support. She felt the restraint as if it had been strapped across her ribs. The old Moonvale thread touched the edge of her mind, thin as a hair under breath. At the south bend, I know. No dais and none hold. Holding. She broke the link before it grew tight enough to hurt. Down in the yard, the training ladders came out and chalk lanes were set. Varric crossed the dust with a rhythm that never wasted a step. Draven, leaving council, cut across the yard and the focus in the bond sharpened as if he had laid a hand under her breastbone and steadied it. He did not look up at her. He didn't have to. The link tightened a fraction as if to check whether she would keep pace if he pulled her into movement. She did. The staircase turned under her, and the third step tugged like always. Her hand brushed the rail and let the small sway pass. The training yard felt older in daylight. Chalk held the faint gloss of dew. The cambered beam's shadow curved like a watchful brow. Wolves worked in pairs and trios without talk, the keep's noon silence filling the gaps. Varric pointed to the beam and turned away to watch a yearling misjudge the first foot of a ladder and correct on the second. Elara crossed the straight rail and felt her center settle. The cambered rail asked for a different kind of listening. It tilted to lie and tell truth at once. She let her ankles read it. By the third pass, what had felt like trickery turned into conversation. Draven arrived at the edge of the chalk and did nothing for a moment but watch the yard as if reading a score. The bond hummed level. He adjusted a young wolf's stance with 2 fingers, then lifted his chin toward Elara. Foot circle, no flourish, no lecture. She stepped in and let his hand draw patterns in the air. Cross, open, cut, retreat, close. He tightened the figure until breath went louder, then eased it half a beat. The rhythm landed somewhere she could hold. The tribunal appeared at the shade's edge the way cold appears on water. 3 still figures. Faces calm, eyes that wrote tallies. One tipped his head and let his mouth curve in a shape that forgot to be a smile. Demonstrate control. Draven didn't turn. His voice was a smooth stone in the stream. Control is how the pack moves when no one is watching. They aren't blind, they don't need a stage. The elder's hand set under his sleeves, folded, disappeared. The yard kept working. Elara finished the pattern and stepped out. Varek put water in her hand. It tasted old and good. When Draven pulled the pack link to shift 2 sentries on the wall, the surge brushed her skin like wind off the ridge. She rode it and kept her feet where they belonged. The bond warmed in answer and then steadied. Council again. The hum withdrew from the yard as he crossed toward the hall. The elders flowed after him. Weather that wanted to be believed. Elara stood under the balcony sliver of shade and learned the sound of the keep thinking. In the link's undertone, she felt the moment his temper flared. Blade thin and brief. And the moment it turned to something heavier. Fatigue came on a delay after he dismissed the elders. She felt it settle, without dipping his pace. Her wolf moved along her spine and spoke without sound. We could use that, not to soften, to know where he is weak enough to be honest. The thought made her mouth taste of iron. She crossed to the ladder frame and took it hand over hand because moving worked better than standing still while your heart made up stories. The bundle arrived as nothing at all. Varek walked by with a strip of cloth folded once, twice, as if bringing up a bit of bread he didn't want to drop. He didn't pause. He brushed her fingers with it in passing and set a cup on the rail. The cloth transferred weight to her palm that was more than cloth. Willow and mint were there. Beneath them, something soft and clean. Honey from home. A shard the size of a fingernail wrapped in wax. A thread of rosemary that made her eyes sting. Moraine had knotted the cloth in a pattern she had used when they were 15 and stealing fruit out of the orchard. Long, short, short, long. The code inside the old joke was simple. I see you. You are not alone. Eat first. The bond reacted to the scent like a second breath. Heat lifted in her chest. Draven's attention turned so quickly the air in the yard seemed to contract. He was still in the hall. He felt the shift as if the keep had rung and he knew which note belonged to him. He came across the yard before she could slip the bundle under the cloak. He didn't come at a run. Wolves were watching. He walked as if he had always been heading her direction, and this just happened to be the moment footsteps made sense. Varek drifted 2 paces away, not leaving, making room. Draven stopped at arm's length. The bond put a warm hand between them that wasn't a hand. The scent of honey had nowhere to hide. Where? She held up the folded cloth. The wax-wrapped shard inside pressed a small hard truth against her palm. I didn't ask for it, you kept it, yes. His mouth didn't harden, it didn't soften. The restraint she had felt on the table a little earlier stepped into his shoulders. He held out his hand. She gave him the cloth. He unknotted it without tearing the threads and looked at the small gift as if it were a blade he needed to understand the balance of. He didn't break it. He folded the cloth back around the wax and set it in her palm again. The keep's light hit the long scar at his shoulder and made it a pale river for one breath. You will eat first, his voice low enough to be almost only in the link. That's already true. His gaze went to the tribunal in the shade. They were watching now with the particular brightness that said they smelled leverage and wanted to call it law. He flicked a glance at the practice hall door. The message was easy to read. Not here. She stepped off the chalk. Varek arranged himself as a shadow. Draven took them through the short passage past the storage cells and into the small room with the low table and the clean metal scent. The light there held shadows soft enough to look like water. He did not lock the door. He shut it until the latch touched wood and stood with his back to it a heartbeat long. It looked like a man keeping the world out without turning his back on it. His voice was quiet. You feel it when you hold anything from them? Yes. And you feel me feel it? Yes. He moved to the table and set both hands on it. Not in threat. The line of his spine told her what the morning had cost and what it would still ask for. He didn't let the bond persuade him to soften that line. He let her see it. He lifted a hand and stopped with his knuckles, a breath from her jaw. Not touching. Warmth made the air there carry his shape. He held it for a count, and then lowered it again. Say it. She looked past his shoulder to the thin seam of light under the door, and then back to him. Words did not want to be her way through this. She used them anyway. I feel you when I do not want to. He didn't move. The bond did, a slow tide running under skin. And you feel me when you should not. When I choose not to. You don't choose as often as you tell yourself. His mouth twitched as if he had tasted something sharp and didn't mind it. The room's silence thickened, not heavy, closer. The mark along her neck warmed and cooled in small waves. Let it sharpen, he said, too soft to carry beyond the table. No, let it sharpen and keep your feet. She breathed low to answer, and the warmth climbed her ribs like a careful hand. Her knees wanted to blur. She told them to hold. They did. Truth split, and became two truths standing side by side. She hated that she wanted his approval when she did it right. She took the hate into her mouth and kept it there without spitting it. Her wolf stepped out of the dark place she used to sleep and set herself between them without moving a muscle. This is danger. This is also the thing the body understands when the head does not. Keep the posture that gives us leverage. Do not crouch, do not rise. He reached for the clay jar, opened the moonveil salve, then Nightfang's. He didn't touch her. He stood back and held both open in a question she could answer, with a nod. She nodded. He set the jars down and didn't step in. You asked me this morning whether I want you to hate me so I can manage you. Yes, I want you alive. Hate will do if it keeps you breathing. I would rather spend less expensive currencies. You cannot afford softness here. I can afford precision. The bond ran a bright thread through his words. It held a second truth there he wasn't speaking, a thing that lived under his ribs and was learning its weight. She felt it, and it scared her, because it was not only his. The keep breathed outside the door. A wheel creaked in the yard and quieted. A runner missed a step, caught it, carried on. The Tribunal's voices rasped across stone from far away like winter bark. Draven moved closer by less than a hand. Heat expanded the space around him. He tilted his head and the scar across his ribs lifted, pale under the light. Look at me, she did. He didn't hunt her mouth. He took her eyes and kept them so the rest of her couldn't lie. The bond held like a line drawn across her hip bones, steady and sure. Her breath found the low place it lived best and stayed there. Admit what this is, not to give it power, to take some back. It is a bond I did not want. It is. It is a pull you are not abusing. It is a pull you will use when I must. You will always tell yourself it is must, then you will tell me when I am wrong. Her laugh was a breath she tried not to let out. It escaped anyway. He did not use it against her. A shadow paused outside and moved on. The room let the quiet flex in its joints. He shifted his weight, a small change that made heat step closer. Breathe, he said. I am. Again. She did. The pull didn't vanish. It obeyed. Her wolf stood with ears forward, not defying, not yielding, waiting like a hunter who knows the wind is about to change. He lifted his hand a second time and she did not look away. The knuckles stopped a breath from her skin. The pause put every nerve on her throat into a single bright point. She held the line. The bond rose, and the room made itself smaller to watch. His mouth came near her ear and stopped. The question in it was not a question she could answer with words. He let it hang where breath meets breath and refused to take the inch himself. The latch clicked faintly as the wood adjusted. Footsteps crossed the passage. The Tribunal's voices angled closer, slower, as if deciding which door would give them the better story. Draven's eyes held hers and did not move. The bond pulled tight enough to make her ribs complain. Look at me, he said, quieter than before. She did, and the footsteps stopped outside the door. The handle turned once and held. The wood took the weight and did not complain. A voice spoke just loud enough to carry through oak. Alpha. Draven's eyes never left hers. The door remained shut. The voice waited a breath. One more. She felt the decision leave him like a muscle unclenching. The handle released. The steps withdrew. He didn't lower his hand. Heat hung there, not touching. Too close to be nothing. The bond climbed and steadied. Her heart reached for a beat she could own. He drew the faintest breath and kept her eyes. Say it again. I feel you when you are not here. He nodded once, and the room took that single motion like a promise it would hold him to later. The latch sounded as someone paused outside for the second time in a minute, and this time the footsteps didn't move away. The elder's mark on the other side of the wood was a cold thought pressed to warm grain. Open. The word through the wood was flat. Open. Draven didn't move. The bond tightened like a drawstring. Elara kept her eyes on his and let the handle turn against solid grain. The wood creaked and held. Silence lengthened until it had a shape. He stepped back the distance of a breath and lifted the latch as if he had always planned to. The door swung a hand's width. An elder's pale marks stood in the cut of light. Face smooth. Eyes curious the way Wynther is curious about crops. Alpha, you found the wrong door. The right door is the one you open. This one closes now. The elder's gaze slid past his shoulder. Not leering. Measuring. Wondering how to turn a person into a lever. The pack wants certainty, he murmured. We provide it when their leader hesitates. I am not hesitating. You are hiding. Heat pressed outward from Draven without a rise in voice. The elder's shoulders shifted before his face could stop them. You test lines you cannot afford to cross. Draven said, quiet. Close it, Varric. Varric had been shadow along the passage wall. He palmed the wood and the latch fell into place with a small, exact sound. Footfalls withdrew, soft as dust brushed from a sleeve. Elara let out a breath she hadn't meant to hold. He heard it. No triumph. He glanced at her fist, still closed on the folded cloth, then at the 2 jars on the table. Eat. She unwrapped the wax, broke the honey shard with her thumb, let it dissolve on her tongue. Warmth spread. Willow and mint followed with clean edge. Her wolf eased along her spine like a coil untying. He didn't move closer. He watched the seam of light under the door as if counting how many times the elder's step gathered and went away. Then he lifted the latch. The world flowed back in. They crossed the passage without speaking. The yard held its steady pulse. Rope, sand, breath. The Tribunal had retreated to shade to write the next shape of their wish. Draven took the steps to the balcony and paused at the turn. Feel where I am and hold that line. I do. Even when the room tries to teach you otherwise. It will always try. He left her there and went to drills that made bodies strong without turning them into spectacle. The bond carried the shape of his day through her whether she wanted it or not. He tuned yearlings until their feet stopped arguing with the ground. He settled watches with a single tone through the link. He took a cup from Varric and left a swallow, without seeing his hand do it. Elara leaned into the balcony shade and kept off the wall. The cambered beam tricked and taut, chalk thinned, was redrawn. Above it, clouds gathered and moved on without choosing storm. Counsel took him again. She felt him go as if her own legs crossed dust. Pressure layered. Numbers. Stores. North Ridge quiet. The elders turned every item toward a stage. The push hit him and slid. Temper flared blade thin and vanished. Fatigue landed and did not slow his answers. It weighed his breath. We could run what he runs if we had to, her wolf said. We do not want to. We still could. She left the balcony and the view that pretends things are simple. Varric angled a shoulder toward the practice hall. No words. The floor there looked like last year and 10 years ago at once. Scars rubbed dark with oil. He slung a strap from beam to post and set it swinging. Hands only. She gripped, lifted, let the strap teach when to hold and when to yield. The burn wrote truth old and simple. Breath in counts. Corset. Hips quiet. When the tremor turned to clean heat, she dropped. Varric's short nod landed like a stamp. The bond pulsed. Draven's attention touched the threshold and waited. He didn't enter. He let her feel him there and decide not to be grateful or angry. She chose neither. He came in because a leader walks all his rooms before dusk. He stood by the doorway. Heat reached, not crowding. You won't always get warning. The bond sharpens without mercy. Practice for that. How? Cold distance work. You are all three. Sometimes I am none. Both truths hung in the space between them. Her wolf studied him and did not tell her which truth would give better leverage. An elder tried again in the afternoon. He came to the yard's edge with a smile that wanted to sell certainty. Alpha, you needed something. The pack needs reassurance. It ran last night, it held this morning, it eats at dusk, that is reassurance. The pack needs to know the mark you set is not a weakness you carried into the yard. The pack can tell the difference. Bring her to the gate at dusk, let our neighbors count the cost of crossing. You want Moonveil to charge. I want their alpha to learn what he cannot have. Then learn from me instead, you don't get this. Regret tried to live in the elder's mouth and turned out hunger. You bought yourself a day when you refused the dais. You will spend it by dusk. Draven didn't look toward the balcony. The bond put his shape at Elara's shoulder anyway. The elders turned away and left a smear of cold behind them. Varric climbed the stair with the clean weight of a man who spends himself where spending matters. He stopped a pace off Elara's shoulder and watched the yard with her. Eat. She let the last of the honey melt. Her stomach settled. The bite cooled. The bond steadied. Training slid into tasks. Ropes moved. Barrels rolled. The light tried on evening and kept it. Draven's focus made the keep answer in small ways. A pause in one corner, a lifted hand in another. A problem solved before it needed witnesses. Elara closed her eyes and found him in the shape of the place. Fatigue hooked his shoulder. He set it aside. It returned. He set it aside again. The feeling made her chest ache. Not with pity, with recognition. Her wolf went quiet and listened to a rhythm not her own for longer than a breath. The boy with rope from morning crossed again, shoulders a fraction higher. Draven flicked a glance, and the line in the boy's hand steadied. A small thing, not small to the boy. Private chamber, Varric murmured. He'll look like a man for a moment there. Decide what to do with that before you go. She said nothing. The small room off the passage had turned into ground where truth sounded louder. She took the stair slow enough to keep the third step from catching her breath. The door stood half open. She could feel him before she saw him. He was bent over the basin, sleeves rolled high, hair damp where water had woken nerves better than sleep. He wasn't arranged for her. He looked like a body carrying what the day had asked. Her breath fumbled. The bond recorded it and made it a note he could hear if he wanted. He didn't turn. He finished the water and straightened. Scars took light, then let it go. Close to the latch. She did. The room shrank. Heat drew a small world. He leaned both hands on the table and let his spine speak. Not a speech, a refusal to pretend. You're tired. I am. You don't show them. They don't need it. I didn't ask if they did. He looked at her. The wolf behind his eyes sat near the surface and chose not to rise. The mark warmed as if a hand had found it. Her body signed a consent her mind would not. She held both truths up until neither could lie. He crossed the floor to the distance that lets breath meet breath without touch. This is where the bond takes most. When the day cuts nerve thin. I feel it. Use it. How? Breathe until it obeys. That works if you obey first. A quiet sound escaped him. He lifted his knuckles to a breath from her jaw and stopped. The pause there taught more than contact. Her knees wanted to forget duty. She told them to remember. They listened. He pulled the pack into one tone, the note that says stand, but do not bare teeth. He held it while he held her eyes and the room tilted. She steadied herself with 2 fingers on the table and let the tilt pass. Admit it. I feel you when you are not here, and you choose sometimes to feel nothing. I try. You fail. Not always? Good. He stepped back. Air cooled by a measure you could count. He rinsed his hands again as if washing fatigue out. It didn't go. It settled his breath. Footsteps crossed the passage. The handle turned and held. He tipped his head, listened, refused entry without raising voice or hand. Barrack's shadow went by. The world kept its place for another minute. They'll push again at dusk, he said. Offer law with a stage hidden inside. You'll refuse. I will. They will call you weak. They will call me wrong. When it works, they'll call it theirs. Why let them keep the name? Names are lighter than blood. Silence edged the room. The bond moved through it, warm and slow. Her wolf turned twice and lay down to watch. You keep leaving space for me at the edge, she said, even when you could fill it. I keep leaving space for myself there too. What do you do with it? Listen. To what? To the part that remembers the boy who held still until old men ran out of hands. The sentence moved like a draft through a narrow window. No comfort. Honesty. She could stand in that, better than in gentleness meant to lull. He reached for the latch. The world touched the room again. Louder. Busier. He didn't open the link to talk. He set a pulse the pack could share. The yard answered with small adjustments. Nothing grand. Everything important. Eat. Rest if you can. When the watches are set, I'll bring you out. And if they build anything tall, I will take it apart before the first torch catches. He left. The door latched softly. The bond tugged and let go like a current she had learned to stand in. She worked the cambered beam again, let ankles remember. Varric set a practice blade in her palm and nudged a finger width. The grip settled. He stepped back to watch without hurry. Outside, the tribunal walked the wall, rehearsing faces for when they were right. Draven crossed the yard with sleeves rolled, counting the cost of small choices and paying it without asking for witness. She felt his fatigue and the shape he made, so it would not spill. A tone opened in the link, smoothing across Nightfang minds. Watches set, gates quiet, north ridge doubled, east runners at dark. No stage, no horn. Hold. The pack answered with movement instead of voice. Obedience that lives in muscle memory, not fear. The hum took Elara's bones. She did not fight it. Her wolf lifted her head and pointed ears toward the north. The old Moonveil wire brushed her mind with careful weight. Ryland. Close. He didn't use words. He sent the feel of a man looking at another man from a distance that wasn't enough. Then one line. I will count him with my eyes. He will smell you, and I intend him to. She didn't tell him not to. He knew the plea she wasn't making. The wire loosened, but did not let go. The bond rose as if it had heard the same choice and set its teeth. Dusk thinned light until edges sharpened. Varric banked a brazier low in her room and left the door unbolted. The keep shifted into the hour where small sounds carry far. She sat without lying down and let breath find the pace the day had taught it. In the yard, a frame rolled 3 feet and rolled back. Draven stopped it with one hand. The frame went away like a bad thought, not yet clever enough to hide. He moved under the eaves where the dark makes its first promises. She felt him there as clearly as if her palm rested against his back. It shocked her less now. It frightened her more for that. Torches caught along the wall one by one. The court with the cracked fountain sank into deeper shade. Air cooled in a way that tells a body what season it is, even if the sky argues. Elara closed her eyes and felt the link like a pulse under floorboards. She breathed with it until the bond followed instead of led. A step went wrong outside and corrected. A quiet voice offered a cup and got a nod. The elder's tread approached and stopped. Draven didn't turn. The elder didn't push. Equilibrium held, Elara opened her eyes to a dark that had finished deciding. The knight would ask for a choice. Not the elder's performance. Not the rescue any brother wants. A smaller, stranger choice that would decide the shape of larger ones. She stood and touched the cool windowstone. The bond answered like a heart in the next room. It did not recede when asked. It occupied the dark. She hated it and used it, and held both truths together without letting either break. Below, Draven lifted his head as if called. No one had spoken. He answered anyway. Night settled cleanly, no bruise of storm at the rim. Only the even dark that makes stone cool and breath louder. The keep thinned its sounds to what mattered. A hinge catching once, a lantern trimmed, a runner correcting a step mid-mistake. Elara stood at the window with her palm on the sill and counted until her breaths matched the slow pulse of the place. The bond lived under her ribs like a coal that refused to go out. It didn't yank. It glowed. Draven moved beneath the eaves and set his weight where the inner yard carries it well. She felt the way his shoulders took the night on, as if he had agreed to hold it until morning took its share. The moonveil thread touched lightly pine pitch and river rock. Ryland held the contact like a blade wrapped in cloth. Close to the south bend I feel you, counting him with my eyes if the night lets me. He will smell you. He should. The wire loosened but didn't let go. Elara's mouth went dry. Her wolf lifted her head and turned one ear to the north, the other to her heart. Choose the breath that steadies, not the one that feeds panic. Varric left her door unbolted and the brazier banked low. He passed once in the hall with a pot in his hand and didn't look in. The keep had decided on quiet. Anything loud would be a choice, not an accident. Elara took the stairs and stopped at the first balcony turn where the wall hid her from most eyes. Below, a frame that had learned to come when called, rolled a few feet and rolled back, then gave up, pretending it had purpose. Draven put a hand to it and sent it away. He didn't speak. The yard obeyed. The bond tightened as he turned toward the dark beyond the gate. A scent thread ran along the wall and vanished in the pines. Not Moonveil, not Nightfang. Outsiders with cloth painted to be a banner, if someone foolish named it so. He opened the pack link with a note Elara knew in her bones. Stand. No teeth. The walls took the tone and carried it. The Tribunal paced the inner walk, like men rehearsing a reaction they wanted to use. Nobody fed them. Ryland slid nearer on the wire. Air changed the way it does before rain, cool without wind. He didn't push words. He made his presence a fact. Don't, Elara sent. I will not charge your gate. I will count the man who holds it. He will feel you, then he will count me back. The bond heated as if it had heard and decided to have an opinion. Draven's attention climbed the wall without moving his feet. He turned his face and the knight looked at him more closely. Elara left the balcony. The small court with the cracked fountain pulled like a side road that knows your step. Water slid through moss without asking. Shade kept the air soft. She stood there until her breath found the slow track again. He came without sound. She felt him before the corner let her see him. The mark warmed and settled, steady as a drum in another room. Walk. They crossed to the narrow passage in the small room with clean metal in its air. He set his palms on the table and let his spine speak. He looked like a man who had asked his body for more than it owed and been obeyed anyway. You feel him? Yes? He is wise enough not to throw himself at a wall. He is wise enough to do it if he must, then I will not give him a wall. The answer was obvious. She let it sit. He reached toward her jaw and stopped a breath short, the way he did when he wanted the pause to teach. Heat made the air there heavy. She refused to sway. The bond rose. Her wolf watched, ears forward, not defying, not yielding. Breathe and I am. Again. She did, and the pull obeyed enough to stop being an argument and become a steady insistence. He lowered his hand. Absence had edges. His gaze flicked to the folded cloth tucked in her cloak seam. A small smile that wasn't soft moved his mouth when the rosemary thread glinted like a secret told to the right person. Your healer ties better knots than my elders make plans. She is better at most things. You will not use that signal if the earth by the creek has hardened. I won't. He nodded once, not permission, acknowledgement stored for later. A prickle ran along the back of Elara's neck. The bond sharpened in a way that wasn't pack and wasn't brother. An old place waking. Draven felt it the same breath she did. He tuned the link up half a note. The North Watch answered by shifting weight. Outsiders moved west. You won't guess wrong, and I will let them think I have. His eyes found hers and held. Quiet didn't hide the wolf, it housed him. The mark pulsed once under that look, like a drum tapped to test the skin. Admit it again, I feel you when you are not here. And you try to feel nothing when I am. I try. Sometimes you fail. I know. Timber eased in the latch. Silence turned its shoulders so both of them could see it better. He stepped close enough that breath learned a new way to move. He didn't touch. This is not mercy. I am not gentle to be good. I am precise so we both survive what we did not choose. It feels like both. Then use it. Don't drown in it. He turned his head as if a scent crossed the stair. The bond sharpened. Varric's footstep touched the edge of hearing. The door stayed closed. Draven breathed once, slow, and the moment thinned without breaking. He left first because he had to. She waited until the link cooled and followed. Torches along the wall lifted small suns into the yard. The tribunal split to watch from two places, as if triangulation forced certainty. Varric leaned on the balcony rail like a man who trusts timber and counts odds. He didn't look at Elara when she joined him. North Ridge is quiet, he said. Quiet like something listening. Ridge always listens, and tonight it has good ears. They watched the wall in silence. Twice a light moved where there should have been none, then vanished before it could be counted. The pack didn't howl. It didn't need to. The link held it in place. Ryland slid nearer until Elara could have sworn she smelled the creak on his coat. He pressed resolve, not words. Its weight belonged to winters that never ended when you wanted them to. Do not do anything that marries me to their story, she sent. I will not let them write you in a way I cannot read. The wire thinned but refused to break. The ache of it made her press 2 fingers to the mark and pull them away before habit could right itself. Time stretched like tanned hide. The yard found the hour where even liars have to breathe true. Draven moved under the eaves and paused where the wall's shadow meets open air. She felt the hesitation in him. Not weakness. A man choosing the exact shape of his next step so it couldn't be used in a speech. He went up at last, not to the highest walk where elders like to look large, but to the second level where a leader keeps his body inside the fight without giving the enemy his silhouette. He set his hands on stone. The bond hummed through Elara, as if she had done it herself. She stepped back into the small court. Moss darkened at the crack in the bowl where water found its path. She crouched and slid the rosemary thread under the stone lip, where a hand quick at midnight might find it. Not an invitation, a line. If the ground softened, Miran would know she could lay a new bundle without tripping a game that wasn't hers. Footsteps turned into the passage and stopped. Draven stood at the mouth of the court, shadow quiet over his shoulders. He looked at the bowl, and then at her hands. You left a line. I did. You didn't make it a promise, no. He came near enough that heat made a small world. The bond rose. Her wolf stood and set her weight even with his. Look at me. She did. It steadied her in a way that made her angry to be steadied. He tasted the anger and didn't use it. Breathe, I am. Again, she did. The pull obeyed. Then came the harder thing anyway. Her knees wanted to slide into a shape that makes falling easier. She didn't let them. His restraint ran against hers until the 2 rhythms made a third. Tell me what you want to control over me, over myself. You have it, not always. Then practice until you do. He put his knuckles near her jaw and left them there. The pause had teeth. Her breath changed in ways she couldn't help. He didn't take the last inch. He made her hold it too. The wolves inside both of them laid ears back and waited. A small scuff above told a small truth. The elder with the bright scar had turned his head and wasted his attention on shadows. Draven's mouth tilted in a fraction of victory that wasn't about the elder. It was about the two of them still on their feet. He stepped away before the moment could right itself without consent. Absence cut. The bond didn't recede. It stayed, warm and insistent. He went to the wall. The pack made room in the link and worked without being told step by step. Elara returned to her room because Mirian would have told her to lie down, even if sleep had no plan to come. The brazier made a small glow. She didn't undress. She sat with her back to stone and watched light move along the ceiling like slow water. The keep's noises slid through the walls. A latch settling. A rope lifted and rehung. A laugh that tried to be quiet and almost was. The bond grew stronger there, not because he pushed, because he stopped trying to be hidden. He had work. He gave all of himself to it without building a wall against her. She felt the way he read the tree line. She felt fatigue hook at the wrong angle and him lift it and set it aside. She felt his chest expand when he measured his pack and found it breathing as one. She felt temper rise once, like a blade, and drop back into oil. Her wolf spoke in the small space breath leaves when it is done. We can pretend it is only heat, but you know it isn't. Decide what you will save first when the ground gives. She didn't answer. Any answer would be a promise to someone. The night had too many ears. Time moved, quiet and firm. The elders walked the wall and waited to be right. The outsiders breathed at the ridge until boredom or fear wore them out and sent them along. The pack kept its teeth in its mouth. Varric went past her door once. Silence afterward belonged to a man who had done what needed doing and had no need to say it. Near dawn's edge, the keep took a single deep breath. Elara felt it in her bones. On the wall, Draven leaned heavier than he had all night and let the weight go in the same heartbeat. He didn't leave the walk. He set the link to a lower hum and offered the pack the easing that comes before morning says its name. A thread brushed her mind. Ryland, close as cold at a creek crossing. I have counted him. And he is exactly the danger I feared and not enough to make me reckless. Relief hit so fast it hurt. It lasted one breath. The wire carried what followed. If they force a play at daybreak, I will break it. Don't, I will do it without writing you into it. Even quietly, that promise had the shape of a cliff. Elara pressed her fists to her thighs until the urge to move fell back into place. The link warmed as Draven left the wall. He crossed the yard with a pace that told her how much he still had to spend. He didn't climb to the tower. He stopped under the eaves and looked at the thin seam of gray along the trees. The bond threaded itself through her breath and tied a knot in her sternum. He started for the hall, the place where morning drafts pretend to be law. The bond didn't loosen when his body left the stones her body knew. It stayed and rearranged the room without anyone entering. She stood, legs held, hands steady. The coal lost its bright and became ash. The window sent in a strip of light that hadn't been there a moment before. She felt him in that new light as if her palm lay flat against his back. She felt Ryland at the ridge as if her fingers had just let go of his sleeve. The space between those two lines had narrowed while she watched, smaller than a hand's breadth now. Her wolf didn't ask a question this time, ears forward. Still. The day would demand an answer soon. Elara understood what the night had taught with its quiet. The bond wasn't easing. It was learning how to hold her without asking. It would find her whether he stood a pace away or a valley between. She tasted fear and named it. Not because fear rules, but because lying to it makes it breed. She set her palm to the cool stone and didn't move it until the stone accepted heat. Down in the hall, a chair answered the weight of a man choosing how to sit before old wolves tried to make him stand on a platform. Out on the ridge, a brother watched the same keep and chose patience one more time because love spends minutes as well as blood. The quiet closed itself without sound. The day put its foot on the threshold. She felt Draven step through it and felt him still. She felt her brother hold, and felt him ready to stop holding. The knowledge dried her mouth and stopped the last shake in her hands. It would only get harder from here. And even as he left the yard for the long haul, she felt him as if he were in the room, presence thrumming under her skin, a truth she could not outrun. Dawn slid into the stronghold without color, only a slow lift of gray that made stone breathe. The yard stirred. Sand dragged smooth. Ropes were coiled. Buckets moved from shadow to shadow. Elara watched from the window and felt the mark warm in time with the place. The bond picked up Draven where the inner stair turned. It carried the set of his shoulders, the way he checked the morning like a door that might fight him. The tribunal stood at the base of the long hall with faces arranged for patience. Workers rolled a low timber frame toward the arch. Not high, not innocent. The air around it went thin. Elara's belly cooled. Heat rose under the mark in reply. Her wolf lifted her head inside the quiet. This is not a tool. It is a story someone wants to nail you to. The moonveil thread touched her mind, pine pitch and river rock, held soft enough not to hurt. I am on the ridge. I feel you. If they raise anything tall, I will break it. Hold if you can, holding. The thread eased before it could turn to pain. Varric's knock barely scratched the door. He didn't wait for words. Elara took the stair. The third step tugged like always. Her palm brushed the rail. The moment passed. The yard was lean, the way a body looks when it means work. Nightfang didn't crowd for a show, but attention settled where pressure pooled. The frame stopped short of the gate. A worker laid a hand on a joint and took it back as if the timber had flinched. Draven crossed the dust and set his palm to the frame. Wood answered with a faint complaint. He shook his head. 2 wolves peeled from the wall, took the ends, turned the thing away. The elders didn't blink. The one with the pale cheek scar smiled without showing teeth. Heat pressed up Elara's throat. The bond answered not to drag, to hold. She waited until her breath sounded like hers again. Work. Draven didn't raise his voice. The yard obeyed, lanes chalked, racks straightened, bodies moving in the kind of order that feeds a pack more than any speech. The elders stayed in the shade, patient as frost. Varric tipped his chin toward the beam and the foot circle. He did not ask. He made space that assumed she would take it. Elara stepped onto the straight rail first and reminded ankles and hips who decided. The cambered rail lied and told the truth at once. By the third pass, her center answered before she asked. Draven watched from the long hall's shadow. Sleeves rolled, mouth set to balance refusal with cost. The bond carried his restraint into her chest like a strap pulled 1 notch tighter. Eyes followed her and slid away and returned, as if she were both a problem and an answer. Her wolf paced between shoulders. Do not flatten your ears. Do not raise your tail. Stand. She stood. In the foot circle, Draven drew patterns with his hand. Cross and open, cut and retreat. He tightened the figure until breath grew loud, then loosened half a beat so she could hold. The yard learned with her. A pack is a mirror with teeth. The elders began their own work the way ice forms, quiet and certain. They spoke a word to a sentry without looking at him. That wolf listened without moving his head and started to think thoughts he hadn't needed yesterday. Doubt grows like moss in shade, slow until you slip on it. A young wolf near the racks looked at Elara and looked away. His second look lingered, wondering if want could be treason. Another glance fell on Draven, with the same shape turned over. Heat climbed Elara's ribs. The pull in her body tried to take a step she hadn't chosen. The pack link opened under Draven's hand with a tone that did not ask. Stand. No teeth. No stage. The sound ran through Nightfang's spines and sat in muscle memory. The small tremor eased the way a hand between shoulder blades steadies what wants to shake. The scarred elder walked 2 steps into light. They want certainty, he said, almost gentle. Give it a place to sit. Draven turned his head a fraction and let it stop short of the man. They eat certainty best when it is baked into work. then sweeten it with law. You tried to build law this morning, I made it wood again. The elder's mouth bent. The thing you took has not been shown where it belongs. Elara didn't meet his eyes. She read Draven instead, the way heat gathered under his skin and refused to vent. The pull inside her became a straight line toward him. Her wolf lifted her lip at the heat and did not forbid it. Ryland's thread twanged. He was too near for plans that required perfect patience. His breath shortened against the slope they had raced as children. Not reckless, not calm, no deus, none. If they make one out of air, I will see it. The bond pushed against the wire as if to say it owned the room. Not jealousy. A weight announcing itself. The elders flowed among edges like oil on water to see what would shine back. A shrug here, a word there. The question they fed was small and bitter. Did your alpha hesitate because of her? Elara felt the turn of eyes before her mind named it. Breath got hard at the top of her chest. Draven's attention cut across the dust like a thrown line and landed on her. He didn't narrow his gaze. He didn't look away. The bond tightened until her knees thought about forgetting their job. Do not run to him, her wolf warned. Hold and make him come take what he started. He did not make her wait. He crossed the yard with a pace that told every watching back who owned the ground. He stopped at the exact distance where a shared breath stays a choice. The tribunal tipped forward a little as if scenting sweetness. The yard kept still because the link told it to. He didn't give the elders anything they could carve into a speech. He gave the pack the answer they had been forced to wonder about. He set his voice in the quiet the work had earned. She is my mate. No flourish, no drum. A fact that landed like dawn. Sound took it, and bone took it. The mark burned clean and sure. The line in her body turned from argument to alignment. The pack took one long breath together. Spine straightened along the walls where eyes had wavered. Shoulders eased near the racks. The elder's smile went flat. A young wolf blinked as if a hand had pressed to the nape of his neck and taught him how to stand again. Elara did not reach for Draven. He did not touch her. His restraint in front of them behaved like a second vow. The link hummed, not a shout, a note you feel in your teeth. Work, eat, watch the north. Bodies loosened by a fraction and found duty. The tribunal counted costs and looked toward the gate as if profit might arrive if they stared hard enough. Beyond the wall, the pines breathed different. Elara felt the moment she had dreaded loosen itself from the trees and roll downhill. Ryland's thread drew tight. He had spent nearly all the patience he'd brought. He had counted the man holding her, and decided the next step would be forced if no one else took it. Elara's mouth dried, her wolf braced. It is coming. Draven's chin tipped a degree. The bond told her what his nose already knew. Moonveil had stopped being scent underbrush and was now a line with heartbeat and intent. The yard set its breath on one count, and waited for a word it already knew by heart. The elders stood like men waiting for weather to prove them right. Elara stepped forward until she stood even with Draven. The yard watched two bodies share a line. The bond shifted, not to command, to align. It put her breath where his would steady it. Her heart obeyed because rhythm is a fool's compass, and also a true one. Draven's mouth moved half a thought toward a shape she couldn't name. He didn't look at her. He gave the order the pack needed. Hold the gate. No charge unless I call it. Wolves vanished into lanes strangers don't see until teeth find them. The beam above the arch hummed a little, as if it had muscle under the sap. The ground got very honest. Ryland came to the edge of the trees with a dozen at his shoulder. No banner. Sky behind him, and the look of a man who had chosen what he would spend. Elara felt him as if they shared a room. Eyes on her. Jaw locked to keep love from breaking its teeth on rage. The tribunal leaned the way men lean when they want blood they won't pay for. Elara's wolf flattened her ears and lifted them again, shutting out the worst of it. Heat climbed the bond until it stung. Draven let it. He didn't shield her from what belonged to both. He didn't hide from it either. The mark hummed like iron cooling after a forge. Ache and want, warning and steadiness. She let it live in her without moving aside. Ryland lifted a hand asking his wolves to hold. He didn't roar. He didn't bargain. He placed himself where a sister could see him and a rival could count him. Words rose in Elara's throat that would cut more than they fixed. She let them fall and pushed only across the old wire. Do not make me a test. You were never a test. Blood can love and still let me choose. If you trust us, her wolf added, hold one more breath. Dust tasted like iron. Draven stood near enough that heat made a small climate around them. He lowered his chin the smallest fraction, a man measuring the power in the space he did not take. The pack held because he had taught it how, and because it wanted to. The elder with the scar whispered at the shade and waited for ears. Important ones stayed deaf. Sun slid along the wall's edge and sharpened every outline. Draven drew a breath that went through Elara's shoulder blades. He was about to spend something and trust the cost. The bond brought it to her a beat before he moved. This was the hinge the morning had been walking toward. He opened the link wide enough to touch every mind that carried Nightfang's scent. Stand. The word wasn't a noise. It arrived as a promise. The wall answered. The yard answered. Even the beam seemed to consent. Ryland's wolves shifted without stepping, waiting, like men who know cliffs and fog both from the inside. Draven turned his face to the ridge and back to the yard. He didn't shout. He let the next lines land where the quiet made room. She is my mate. You will not touch her to test me. Touch her and you test Nightfang. Not taunt. Not threat. Law written into the morning without parchment. Elara heard it with ears and again with the part that translates restraint into faith. The mark pulsed in a steady wave. Her knees held. Ryland's hand fell a fraction. Not surrender. A pause that favored love over fury. The ridge behind him held its breath to see what a man becomes when his sister is no longer a rescue and not yet free of danger. Nightfang kept teeth in mouths. The beam did not creak. The scarred elder shifted as if to step into the space Draven had carved. His foot couldn't find the floor. There are rooms you cannot enter if you have not bled in them. Elara didn't grant the elders a glance. She faced the ridge with Draven at her side and knew there was one next move that didn't gift the story to men who wanted to write it for her. She took a single pace forward into the thin strip of ground between both worlds. Not away from him, not toward her brother, into the hinge. The bond pulled, and then steadied, as if it had been waiting for exactly that inch. Her wolf's posture set in a clean line. Across the wire, Ryland's breath caught and leveled. He could read her with less than this. Draven did not take her elbow. He set his voice to the pitch that lets another voice ride through it and still be heard. The pack felt it. The ridge did too. Elara opened her mouth and gave them what they needed. Not a speech. Truth shaped to carry. I am marked, I am not a banner. Her wolf spoke into the minds that could hear what human words can't. Hold. Ryland's fingers flattened to his thigh and stayed. Draven's shoulders eased by something you couldn't see unless you stood where she stood. The elder's mouth thinned until it looked like a scar more than a smile. The beam breathed. The next breath would choose the rest of the day. Heat pressed through the bond to hold her steady. The old thread hummed, asking for honor without making her small. The pack waited to learn what story would feed it through winter. Elara drew air until her ribs resisted and held it, and the yard hung with her. The held breath broke with small sounds that mattered. A boot scraped stone near the gate. A hand tightened on rope. A young wolf exhaled through his nose and chose not to move. The beam above the arch didn't groan. It accepted weight like a shoulder that understood its job. Elara took one step deeper into the narrow ground between ridge and yard. The bond adjusted to her like a steadying palm at her spine. Heat rose along the mark and leveled. Her wolf set weight through invisible pads and kept her posture clean. Ryland lifted a hand in an old signal they had learned as children. His wolves spread just enough to leave air between bodies and choices. He didn't look at the elders. He looked at her. That was the worst of it. The tribunal drew breath as if attention could start a fire. The scarred elder tipped his chin, a man approving of a storm he imagined he owned. Draven did not feed the moment with talk. He opened the pack link to a deeper tone and let Nightfang hold that note like a straight road through fog. Hold. No teeth unless I take mine out first. The sound ran through backs and ribs. It met the old Moonveil thread coiled in Elara and laid a strange harmony across her chest. Uneasy. Strong. A hawk crossed the slice of sky above the wall and kept flying. The world did not arrange itself around men who wanted stages. That fact steadied her more than courage did. Ryland stepped forward alone, border close enough for scent to leap the gap. Open hands, fingers steady. His wolves kept their eyes down with disciplined grace. He bared no throat, offered no teeth. Elara felt him the way a river declares itself in the ear before it appears. His breath rode the wire into her sternum and asked her to be brave without becoming small. The bond answered with a different truth. She was no one's proof. She was a hinge learning to bear weight. The scarred elder moved as if to speak for everyone. Draven cut space instead of voice. He lifted his hand a fraction, and all attention leaned toward that tilt. He turned toward Ryland, without turning his back on the yard. Name what you came to do. Count you. And now, I have. And you are not your elders. The scarred elder let out a brittle laugh. Elara didn't spare him her eyes. She watched Ryland read her stance. Knees still, chin level, shoulders set. He saw the inch she had taken and knew its price. His hand dropped a finger width. Nothing to strangers, everything to them. It should have ended there, a careful step back from the edge. The tribunal moved first. A second elder flicked his wrist toward a junior squad near the postern. A gesture too small to be honest if you didn't live by catching danger in small things. It wasn't a command, it was permission disguised as accident. Two young wolves near the side gate shifted without meaning to. Habit is fast. Doubt is faster, when old men feed it. The pack link tightened in Elara like a belt cinched sharp. Draven's focus sharpened with it. Stand. No breakaway. The elders pressed with whispers, this is your moment. Take the girl, make the rival watch. A heel lifted, another pair of shoulders tipped. Elara's wolf did not ask. Move. She slid sideways across the hinge and set herself between the postern and the breadth of the yard. Sun inched up and took color with it. She felt Draven's certainty lay along her back without touch. The mark answered like metal ringing true. She refused the elders her gaze. She gave the pack her spine. Her mouth opened for one word, and she let Draven's tone carry it so it would land in bone, not just ears. Hold. It went through twice, human and wolf. The wolf's version reached where language can't. Stillness spread the way water shows the shape of stone when the pour is steady. The lifted heels settled. Hinges kept their secrets. The tribunal's smiles forgot their script. Ryland's wolves breathed and didn't move. Ryland stayed very still. The quiet lengthened until it felt like choice rather than luck. The scarred elder adjusted tactics. See how she obeys without knowing. See how a mark turns will into leash. Not to Nightfang. To Moonveil. Poison shaped to sound like wisdom. Elara looked only at the ground between men who would name her a test. The bond carried heat without begging. Her wolf flicked an ear. If they cannot turn you into a tool, they will try to turn you into an altar. Refuse both. Draven lowered his hand and shifted half a pace. The floor understood what it was for. His focus set around Elara like a wall made of something you can't name and can't walk through. He opened the link wider, not to command, to include. Nightfang, his thought said, and the name felt like an open door. Hear this. No wolf takes a step that makes a stage of our breath. Consent came back from deep bodies, a sound that belongs to packs who know the cost of winter. Ryland flexed his jaw the way men do when a decision is finished and muscle needs to catch up. He lifted a flat palm to his wolves and closed it around air. Ready? Not now. Spend strength where it feeds us, not where shaded men demand a show. A pebble rolled down from pine roots. Nothing else moved. The elders hated a morning without spectacle. They probed with smaller barbs, a murmur at the water barrel about softness, a curl of lip about mates as leashes. The lies tasted like iron filings. They did not touch hunger. Elara stepped back to Draven's side with intention and without shrinking. To eyes that didn't know better, it looked like yielding. To the yard, it made the line solid. Warmth from his body shifted the air for a heartbeat. The bond set her breath to that temperature. The scarred elder tried to step into that pocket and found it occupied by something that would not let him in. Ryland's voice carried across the gap without strain. I don't spill my wolves to feed your appetite for a show. He aimed it at the elders and refused them his eyes. And I don't let my sister be made into a flag. Then let the man who marked her prove he holds what he took, the other elder purred. Draven kept his attention where it mattered. I hold what I choose not to make a stage out of a woman. A beat. I will choose it again. Under that, Elara heard what the pack needed to hear. Outcome without humiliation. Ryland heard it too. He glanced at Elara and the old wire carried the exchange that can't be written, only felt. We are not done counting, and I know. You breathe and choose and match me at the place where choice still belongs to us. Patience tore at the tribunal's seams. The second elder flicked his fingers again, sharper. A young wolf at the postern mistook it for a real order, and bolted, not at Elara, but toward the wedge where gate met wall. A movement designed to blur the moment into accident. 3 things happened at once. Varric moved like water turning a corner. He caught the young wolf's momentum and returned it to ground. Knees down, palm flat, teeth safe. Humility without shame. Draven's focus struck the link like a snapped rope. Hold. Ryland's wolves bristled and settled because his hand hadn't lifted. Elara stepped into the seam where the worst mistake would cost the most. Breath steady. Heart loud. The bond flared and held. Her wolf's voice went low through the mind link like a bell through fog. Enough. The elders had the nerve to look wounded by a lack of drama. At last, they turned away. The scarred one took a final look at the chalk guarding Elara's mark, disappointment and calculation sharing the same narrow space. He would try again. Men like him always kept spare plans in their sleeves. The yard exhaled, not triumph. Relief that work could resume without applause. Ryland lowered his arm. He didn't vanish. He took 3 steps into the trees and watched. Elara saw him choose patience again and recognized its price. She sent him the old childhood signal through the thread, the feel of a wrist caught and held for later. It came back to her with the same weight. Nightfang turned to tasks as if refusing spectacle had been another chore worth doing well. Draven didn't pronounce victory. He folded the link down to a working hum and set eating and watches, as if nothing had tried to wedge itself under the door. That is how you starve a spectacle. Feed bodies and give them better work. Elara's legs shook only when shade hid them. Varric drifted to the fountain court and left a cup on the mossed stone without glancing up. The water held a faint taste of iron and patience. It cleared filings from her mouth. She stood under the cracked bowl and let water sounds wash detail from the morning. The bond dimmed from flare to warmth and settled there, stubborn and sure. Draven moved along the wall above like a man redistributing weight on a sled so it won't tip. Ryland waited in the trees, a cold that wasn't cruel. The 2 lines made a triangle in her chest. The point pricked, it didn't bleed. Her wolf spoke, not amused. What you did was not a show. It was a boundary. Boundaries look romantic to those who never had to build one. A soft step touched the court's mouth and paused. Draven stood where shadow cooled the air and let her decide whether to look. She did. He didn't enter fully. He didn't need to own a room to be present in it. Walk? They took the narrow passage to the small room with the plain table and clean metal scent. He shut the door to the latch. He braced both hands on wood and let his spine tell truth. Tired, without weakness. You used my tone. It was the only way that word would land where it had to. It was. Don't thank me. I won't. Silence did the work talking ruins. Heat lifted out of the moment. You gave them law, she said, not theater. I gave them a story they can survive. They'll try to bend it. They'll bend their mouths first. He reached for the Moonveil salve and opened it. Willow and mint rose clean. Let me see. She loosened the collar. The chalk had guarded the bruise from owning the whole story. He didn't touch it first. He studied, as if the page had changed since morning. Not worse. It won't be. He set a thin crescent of salve along the edges where heat lived. No ritual. No unnecessary care. Technique because bodies demand it. Warmth obeyed. The bond took it and returned it. Her wolf watched his attention and made the note she didn't want. He thinks precision can keep winter away. It cannot. He keeps trying. He rinsed and dried his hands without closing space. You held when they wanted a tool. I held because using me was boring. His mouth lost a fraction of tension. They hate boredom. Good. Let them choke. He didn't laugh. The corners of his eyes softened. The bond answered, breath leaving her without counting first. Your brother won't sleep, he said, but he won't spend men to buy smoke. He wants to watch me choose without being forced. And you did. I am not a flag. He let that live in the room, light enough and bright enough for now. Outside, the keep slipped into the hour when first watch trades with second. When bread breaks without speeches. Elara felt Nightfang settle back into itself after refusing entertainment and recognized the strength it takes. You don't arrive there by accident. Varric knocked once and moved on. The day could be managed. That knock was the sentence. Draven studied her without hardening and without softening. Eat. I will. Rest after. At dusk we talk where men without stage hunger can count together. They will hate being left out. They can hold their breath. She tied the collar. The mark hummed. It wasn't fading. It had learned how to be present without dragging. That promise frightened her more than heat had. Endurance announces itself as future. He touched the latch and paused. Air thickened without moving. He didn't turn. The question in the space had been here before. You gave them the word mate, she said. They already had it. I took it away from men who would turn it into a blade. It still cuts. It binds and warns and feeds. Most tools do. He opened the door and left enough presence that her body almost believed he remained. The bond tried to lie once, and almost succeeded. It still settled under her ribs and slowed breath without owning it. She ate what Varric had set aside, meat warm from the pan, bread heel, a smear of fat. The small crystal of honey Moraine had hidden in the last bundle. Sweetness sanded the edges off her stomach. The mark cooled to a workable heat. She lay down because Moraine would have scolded her if she didn't. Sleep took its time. It came in shallow slips with pictures the bond preferred over words. Snow to a boy's knee. A table that had taught itself to take blows. A palm pressed to a young chest while bruise was renamed lesson. She breathed through their ache and let them pass. The Moonveil wire brushed her mind. Ryland hadn't gone. He had found a hollow where patience could be stacked and called a bed. He sent no speech. He sent Creek Curve and Juniper Shadow, the place where a healer can work without eyes. Miran was near. That steadied the piece of Elara that had started to shake without her noticing. Evening would come. The elders would rearrange their masks. Outsiders would test edges because edges are their diet. Nightfang would decide whether the morning had taught enough to ignore itch. The ridge would wait until leaving made as much sense as love. Elara watched the brazier coal choose ash. The bond did not quiet. It settled like a large animal at camp's edge, awake, breathing, steady, not a hand on her, a climate. She could live in that. Her wolf made the old sound it used when choosing a path that saved both ankles. This is not the story where rescue tells you who you are. This is the one where choosing does. Her chest hurt in the good way the first clean lungful does after a stumble. She closed her eyes and let the day sink into stone. Quiet returned, not empty, belonging to the room again. Outside, the keep found its evening pulse. The wall watched without praising itself. The yard moved with the contentment of work done and work ready. The hall waited, undecided about whether it would have to remember how to take blows. Elara felt Draven pass along the second level, take the inner stair, stop at the corner before the small room, as if weighing return. He didn't. Good. He understood a day already asked for more than most. The last thing before sleep was the sense of Ryland turning on pine needles and making space for tomorrow, without billing blood as proof. The first thing after, warmth from a bond that had decided to remain whether she named it or not. She woke to the room where she had left it and a quiet sitting on the sill like a cat owning sunlight. Tests would come. Bait would be set. Patience would be worn bravely or badly, depending on who held it. Her choices would not thin. Often the reward for a right choice is a better difficulty. She sat up. The collar brushed the mark. Heat answered, not a summons, a truth. Her hand hovered and didn't touch. The hum along her wrist felt like acknowledgement instead of demand. It was time to finish what morning had begun. Evening lifted itself out of the stone as if the day had been holding breath for hours. The yard moved in layered quiet, the kind that belongs to work rather than spectacle. Elara woke from shallow sleep with the sense of the keep already choosing the night it planned to have. The brazier had gone to ash. Her body remembered weight and heat and stillness in the same measure. She stood in the mark, heard it first, humming once and settling as if a hand had checked a latch. The bond carried Draven at the edge of her awareness, measuring the wall, listening to the second-level boards answer his steps. Ryland remained at the ridge, a cold steadiness that refused to be hostility. Between them, a thin channel of space remained for choice to pass through. She washed her face in the basin and tasted willow on her skin, proof that care had been a decision and not a performance. When she opened her door, the corridor was almost empty. Varric leaned a shoulder near the stair like a piece of architecture. He pushed away when he saw her, and did not ask whether she had slept. "Council without masks," he said. "Gate court soon." She followed him past the fountain and down into the open rectangle near the arch. Torches stood ready but unlit. The last light in the west held on, blue and nearly gone. Draven waited under the eave with sleeves rolled in attention. The tribunal stood 15 steps away, excluded without needing to be told, their presence a shadow that refused to fall on the floor. Ryland entered from the trees with 3 beside him, Mirian among them in a cloak the color of damp bark. The moonveil thread found Elara like a small flame cupped in hands. It did not press words. It carried trust and 1,000 cautions, and no one pretended this was a ritual. It was a meeting to prevent one. Draven lifted his chin a fraction, a greeting that could pass as respect without debt. Ryland returned the angle. Not bow, not challenge. Mirian looked at Elara in the way healers count breath without seeming to. Elara set herself where she belonged, not at Draven's shoulder, not at Ryland's side, in the hinge between. "Name what we are making," Ryland said, voice low enough to stay inside stone. "A day you can walk away from without leaving blood in it," Draven answered. Mirian stepped forward by a hand. "I want her alive." "You will have her alive," Draven said. Elara felt the bond run that promise along bone and back again. It did not feel like a chain. It felt like a plank laid over water. Ryland's wolves stood with their toes touching lines they had not drawn. Nightfang held its shape without baring teeth. The elders listened for openings that did not exist. "Terms," Ryland said. "No dais," Draven said. "No public tests, no words on stone. If Moonveil needs the gate, we open it for trade and for warning." If Nightfang crosses the creek, it is for water and for help. And her, Ryland said, nodding at Elara without looking long. What then? Draven's breath shifted. She is mine as mate. She is not my flag. She stands where she chooses. If standing beside me feels like safety, she takes it. If standing against me is needed, she takes that too. The sentence rippled through the yard and found places to hold. Elara felt both the pride and the risk of it. The tribunal tasted it and found nothing to hook. Miran's gaze softened and sharpened. I want herbs for her. I want a path to send them that does not cost 2 favors each time. You will have it, Draven said. South Post, last hour before dawn. A small hand will meet a small hand. Ryland looked to Elara over that offer. The thread between them hummed with winter messages. She dipped her chin once. Agreement. Thank you. Not goodbye. The mark warmed and cooled as if approving small logistics because small things decide whether you survive large ones. Elara put her palm to the scarred stone by her thigh and kept the ground's truth in hand. Truce, Ryland said, while I count whether my sister's choice holds, while you prove your law is not briefly worn. Truce, Draven returned, while I count whether your patience can outlast men hungry for noise. They did not join hands, they let the pack links carry the word across wolves who needed it. Nightfang heard, Moonveil heard. The sound was not ceremony. It was a tool laid within reach. Elara felt the moment the tribunal understood no stage would be set. The scarred elder's mouth thinned and tried to become a council's smile. It failed. Mirain crossed the remaining distance and held out a packet wrapped in waxed cloth. Elara took it and caught thyme and poplar and a note of honey like a bell behind a hill. Mirain did not touch the mark. She touched Elara's wrist, a reminder that bodies are bridges and not just banners. Eat, Mirain whispered. Rest. Listen to yourself even when everyone else speaks at once. Elara stepped back into the hinge and watched the choice Ryland made. He lifted his hand and gave a small motion. His wolves turned and vanished into trees that knew them. Mirain followed last. The thread thinned to ache, then held. Draven waited until silence took the place beside the gate that noise had wanted. Then he turned, and his attention found Elara fully, the way a room finds itself when the door shuts. Walk, he said. The keep gave them its narrow hall and its small room and the table with clean edges. Draven did not bolt the door. He did not come closer at once. He braced his hands on wood and let his back carry history without words. The bond brought pieces she already knew and pieces he had not let her see. A boy learning stillness, because stillness meant fewer blows. A young alpha realizing endurance can harden into cruelty if you do not cut it with something better. Why did you mark me that way? Elara asked. She did not fill the question with knives. Revenge, he said. Because I was brittle where I believed I was strong. Because I wanted your brother to feel helpless and did not count what it would take from you. The sentence carried no plea. It held weight and set it on the table. Has it changed? She asked. It has not undone. It has become something I will be measured by until I am ash. He would not use regret as decoration. He would use it like rope to hold while climbing out. Elara looked at the line of his shoulder and followed it to the pale river of scar. She set 2 fingers a breath away, not touching. Her wolf moved with her, ears forward, posture even. The mark warmed, not to claim to acknowledge. Show me all of it, she said. He unrolled his shirt past the ribs and let torchlight name the lines Wynther had left. Nothing was fresh. Nothing was theater. He stood without offering a story. She made her own. You survived men who loved noise, Elara said. You learned to make quiet. You are still learning where quiet ends and kindness begins. He breathed once and something old caught and released. She touched Scar and did not flinch. Heat climbed her wrist and settled like a promise the body can keep better than the mind. The bond rose. It did not demand. It turned the room into a climate with them at the center. "Look at me," he murmured. She did. The wolves inside both of them stepped to the edge and did not bare teeth. Her wolf spoke first, voice low as a stream under ice. "Take him as truth. Do not take him as excuse." His wolf answered like a drum under snow. "Do not take her as victory. Take her as home." Elara did not step into him. She did not back away. She let the inch between them do the work neither could perform with grand gestures. "Will you carry this without making me a banner?" she asked. "Yes." "Will you carry me without calling it control?" "Yes." "Will you let me carry you when your precision breaks?" He closed his eyes and opened them. "Yes." The mark thrummed like a chord tuned to a note only the two of them would ever need. The mate link slid into place with a softness that made her bones ache. Not a chain. A shared breath, taught to move back and forth without loss. She touched his jaw with the back of her fingers the way you touch a hot kettle to learn whether you can lift it. He did not lean. He let her measure. Scent met scent in a clean line. Warmth moved and held. The room narrowed, not small. Focused. She heard a cup, the whisper of leather on a rail, the weight of a guard shifting so sleep would not catch him standing. She heard Nightfang rest without going slack. She heard the trees accept Moonveil into their darkness without taking their names. "Say it," Draven said. I choose you." He did not repeat the sentence. He let the bond answer in full, a curve of heat under her skin, a steadiness in breath, a word said in the mind link where it could echo when distance lied. He did not take her mouth. He set his forehead to hers and breathed. The mark warmed and cooled in slow waves. The wolves leaned into each other without leaving their own ground. The small world around them learned that this was not a storm. It was weather the place could live with. When they let the distance return, it was because they had chosen, not because fear had picked for them. He rinsed his hands and dried them without looking away. "We tell the pack together," he said, "and we will. We tell the elders last, we will." He pushed the latch and let corridor air slide across the skin of the moment. Varric stood near the corner and pretended to be part of a wall. Elara walked beside Draven into the yard that had decided whispers would not direct their lives. Torches lit along the inner walk one by one. Wolves lifted heads and set them down again. No call was made. It did not need to be. Draven opened the link to the breadth of Nightfang and spoke at the level that turns instruction into belonging. "We stand by the law set this morning. We hold our gate for work, not display. Our alpha pair is named. Our mate bond is ours. We carry it in quiet. We will be judged by the food we put on tables, by the watches we keep, by the enemies we prevent from becoming neighbors." The hum that answered had no thrill in it. It had agreement, the kind that survives winter. Elara pushed thought into the mate link and felt it travel like a warm swallow of water. She sent the same weight down the Moonveil thread and found Ryland waiting with a silence that meant he had not slept. "I chose. I heard it before you sent it. Can you bear it? I can bear what you carry because it is yours." The thread stayed. It lost its sharpness. It did not break. She knew it would thin. Packs ask that of their people. When it thinned, she would smell less like home and more like the place she had walked into. Some would name that loss. Some would call it growth. Night lifted and headed toward morning. Work squared itself for the hours that would come. Draven stood without touching her and let heat make the air an honest temperature. The elders watched from shade and learned nothing. Mirren's path sent a small runner to the south post before dawn. A hand met a hand. Waxed cloth changed pockets. The keep noticed and decided it could be normal. Elara slept a little between one breath and the next, standing awake inside sleep. She woke to the wall, taking the first light politely. Her body felt like work, and like something kept safe. She stood at the balcony and saw no dais, no frame pretending innocence. She smelled the ridge settle into distance with less worry and more watchfulness. She went to the fountain court and found it wet with first clarity. Draven met her there with sleeves rolled. He did not reach for her. He stood so breath could meet breath again, without the world needing a name. "Ready?" he asked. "Yes." They walked the yard together while the pack drew lines that mattered and left the ground clean of names meant to trap feet. The tribunal remained in their arch of shadow like brittle ornaments. Elara felt the mate link in small acts, in how a runner's gaze steadied under a hand that pointed rather than pushed, in how a yearling moved his feet because the ground had been drawn with care, in how her center stopped hunting for a safe place for breath and understood she carried it. Her wolf spoke once more, not as warning and not as victory. "This is ours. Keep it quiet. Keep it strong." Elara looked at Draven and saw a man who would be measured by how he used what he had taken and what he had learned. She looked at the yard and saw a place that might teach a better Wynther than the one that raised him. She touched the mark with the light brush of a fingertip, not to summon, to salute. The day moved. Work made music without needing to be called music. The ridge receded and did not vanish. The elders found that no one was listening unless bread needed slicing. Varric trained a yearling to keep heels down. Mirren's rote stayed open. The wall breathed like an animal content to stay awake. Elara stood with the alpha she had chosen in a place that had nearly taught the wrong lessons and watched those lessons fail to root. The bond lived under her ribs like something warm you decide to keep in winter, because you cannot spend it and cannot do without it. She let it be what it was. He did the same. Between them, the narrow space they had guarded all night continued to exist, not as distance, as respect. Into that space, they set their breaths, their work, their law, and the story they would carry. Bound in shadows, they were not broken by them. The stronghold learned a quieter strength. The wolves listened to it and found it fit their teeth. The morning did what mornings do. It began again.